From what I can understand, they wanted this section down here for casinos, gambling places, Gulf coasts. That's what they wanted to put back in here. Now, I don't know how true that is, but some people say it was in the newspaper. I didn't see it. But if that's what they want, if everybody's like me, they got a tough struggle to get it because I ain't turning this one loose.
Soon after I met him, Mr. Gettridge began attracting wider media attention. First in the pages and on the website of the New Orleans Times-Picayune.
Herbert Gettridge is an old retired merchant seaman who one or another of the reporters discovered down there banging together his house in a world of absolute ruin. He's become kind of a poster child for Lower Ninth Ward struggle, perseverance, resilience.
How's the rebuilding going?
It's going pretty good.
In time, CNN would find him too. And Billy Crystal with HBO's Comic Relief.
I'll tell you what, after we do Comic Relief, I'll come back and we'll paint it together.
That'd be all right.
Okay.
Fine.
To each of them, he expressed one goal. He wanted to fix his house so he could bring home Lydia, his wife of over 65 years.
So when you talk to Lydia, did you talk to her on the phone when she's in Wisconsin?
I talk to her. I talk to her every other day, and that's our main question. How long is it going to be?
But I would discover there was much more to Mr. Gettridge's story. That he was a fifth-generation New Orleanian. That his house, set on land his ancestors had once worked as slaves. That he was part of a special group of craftsmen who built and maintained New Orleans' distinctive architecture.
The slaves were the first black people to learn these different crafts. And they didn't only learn plaster, they learned everything.
He quit school when he was 10 years old during the Depression and began his career mixing mortar for a neighbor. That was his introduction to the elite plasterers union.
The plasters were all Creole type of people, light complected, your complected, and lighter. Some of them looking like real Caucasians. So for that reason, we couldn't get to be a plasterer or a bricklayer because it was all those Creole people. And they didn't take just sending everybody in there. And that's what I had to fight. And did I fight it?
Along with his brother, Herbert Gettridge broke the color line in the union. Among his peers, he became known as the Wizard. The owner of this house says he watched in awe as Mr. Gettridge improvised these designs.
I don't think there's another house in the city with a design on the front door, in and out. It's the same way. Plus those columns it's got there. I've never did another one like that in the city of New Orleans. I've never seen one.
Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast. Hopefully to share constructive information on the system of racism. Today's date, Thursday, October 1st, 2015. So, I have been told. The book club, we are on study session number 5 coming up tomorrow. Gary Rivlin, Katrina, After the Flood, same program time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We'll be looking forward to continuing with the reading. I hope folks are learning. It has been a pleasant surprise getting feedback from listeners all over the world who've been listening to the book study session, even people who just listen to the archives, but have been following along and just saying how they've learned so much. Just there were so many details that they didn't know. They just didn't realize that they were alive and were paying attention, or maybe weren't paying close enough attention, or just they were not as informed about racism at the time when Katrina took place. So having a better understanding of what racism is and how it works, and then reflecting and learning more about those events has just made it a very constructive experience for a lot of folks that have written in, and that has been the case for me. That's why we're doing the program today. why we're doing the book study session tomorrow, and why we have invested this time. It's something that I definitely think people should be informed about, particularly people who say that this event meant something to them as a black person, and seeing what has transpired and how this impacted black people in New Orleans specifically. You should know, some details. It shouldn't just be, oh yeah, I remember some grainy images, video footage from 10 years ago. You should know some details about, what happened then and what has transpired over the last 10 years with regards to how this has affected black Louisianans and New Orleans citizens and folks in the Gulf region on the whole. Great information. Looking forward. Tomorrow evening, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Broadcast today. I'd said I'd spent a good deal of time checking out different material, reading books, watching documentary films, trying to go back and read some of the news reports from the time when everything was happening. And I think there were different lists. I think the Times-Picayune, they had a list that they compiled, and then they had a list that the readers compiled, and they had different films. Some of the films were on both lists, but they had different films listed. And one of the films that I saw when I kept looking, because there are a lot of different films that have been done on Katrina, was The Old Man and the Storm. And I checked it out, and it was fantastic. You heard a segment at the beginning of the program with just legend, like in my opinion, just phenomenal illustration of black self-respect. Herbert Gettridge, he's one of the main individuals in the film, and they just kind of follow him. He's one of the victims down in the lower Ninth Ward, and just kind of, his whole life has been ruined with the flood, and he's there just trying to, in the ruins, basically, by himself. Is just, looks like just miles and miles of devastation, just ruins and houses just totally destroyed, nobody around, no electricity, no running water. I mean, just ruins, apocalyptic ruin. And he's there, laboring away, trying to straighten his house out. This is in 2006. And it just kind of follows him as he, labors to correct things, get his house repaired so that his wife can move back with him. His wife has been in Wisconsin the whole time. It's just incredible. There, you get to see some of his other family members as well. His wife Lydia and some of his children that are also there and dealing with the same devastation. It's just a really, really good film. It came out. It was done in 2008. It aired as part of PBS series Front Lines. It came out 2009. But it's great. Thought it would be outstanding to get her as a guest on the program to discuss that film, as well as she has another outstanding project that came out some years before that. It's kind of it's a documentary, but it's an autobiography of her family, and it's just a fascinating story. She has a white mom, a black father, and we've done it. For folks who've listened for a while, it reminded me of one of our previous guests, Lacey Schwartz, and her film, Little White Lie. She was on the program the end of 2014, but yeah, it's in the archive. Anywho, our guest, Miss June Cross, if you are on the line, I'm not able to distinguish which one is you. If you're on the line, if you could press *6, and then I think just press 1, and I'll see your line. I can get you on the line here. We'll be ready to go. Looking forward to chatting about your projects and hopefully getting some questions from listeners as well. Let's see here. She's supposed to be dialing in for us this evening. Miss Cross, if you're on the line, if you could press *6, that would be great. That way I'll know which one is you and not all the other folks that are hanging out. Okay, not saying she might not have called in. I will double check to make sure no wires got crossed or No updates. I didn't miss anything. Okay. Looks like I didn't miss anything. We'll give her a second. In fact, I will send a message to remind her that if I don't hear in a second, I'll give her a ring. We'll give her a second to dial in, and I will give myself a commercial so that I can send her a quick email reminder and see if that can expedite things. So hang tight. We'll do a quick commercial break. Hopefully be right back with our guest, Ms. Cross. Context of White Supremacy. Quick commercial break.
RacismDaily.com, your number one source for global news reports on race, racism, and overt actions of white supremacy. From Asia to the Americas, to Europe, to Australia, to Africa, racism is not a thing of the past. It is our current reality. Be informed. Be globally informed. You should be the first to know. RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open-source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Do you need a one-stop shop for all of your multimedia needs? Triumphant Multimedia is a skilled team of professionals with a passion for great marketing and chic design. Our specialties include consulting, brand development, copywriting, and creative graphic design that's second to none. We also offer photography, photo retouching, videography, and video editing. At Triumphant Multimedia, our goal is to provide highly effective creative solutions built to suit any individual need or budget. Give us a call at 678-732-8067 or check us out online at trimultimedia.com.
Hi everyone, welcome. This is Justice with the C.O.W.S radio program. If you want to learn about, understand, and counter racism, white supremacy, be sure not to miss a C.O.W.S episode. We keep them jammed, packed with constructive information to sharpen your use of words to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy, ASAP. Also, to be able to invest in my counter-racist efforts, co-hosting the C.O.W.S radio program, please visit my blog, justdojustice.blogspot.com.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
Thank you for the patience. I was able to get my message mailed, and hopefully she will get back to us and let us know. I had confirmed with her within the last 12 hours, so she should know that we're looking forward to hearing from her, and that she's supposed to be giving us a ring. Hopefully things will work out, and if not, then deal with that as best we can as well. Anywho, again, Ms. Cross, if you are with us, if you're on the line, just press *6. That way I'll be able to recognize which line is you. Press *6. I think they'll ask you to press 1, and I'll know which line is you. I might have overlooked, been confused about which line you're on. I'll repeat that a few times. is a way. Anyway, as I said, I was inviting our guest on the program to talk about her film on the Gettridge family, which in my opinion is just phenomenal illustration of black self-respect. At the time that she met Mr. Gettridge, he was 82, and he's out in the rubble basically, cleaning and repairing his residence. And, you know, he's not a rich guy with tons of money and that sort of thing. But he's out, you know, just doing his thing. And he owned several properties. He rented out a few properties. I think he had his children, or at least one of his children, staying in one of the properties he owned as well. But he's just there and working to try to get his wife Lydia back. And he had help from some folks. I think Anderson Cooper did some specials on him, some segments on CNN. Billy Crystal, I think, did some segments. I think the local paper, the Times-Picayune, did some segments. I think he got some notoriety during 2006, 2005, when people were really still interested in talking a lot about Katrina. But I mean, he was doing a lot of this, you know, just looked like by himself, just laboring away. No electricity, as I said, no running water. I think no bed for a time. I mean, just, man, the worst type of conditions. And to be 82 years old and laboring away to get his wife back. And I think they had been married like 65 years. I mean, it's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And then on top of that, as I said, there are other people. You get to see some of his other family members who are also going through the exact same tragedy and trying to rebuild their houses, rebuild their lives. And you get to see the little tiny cramped FEMA trailer that some of them are in. The wife said it was so bad she had to leave. She ended up, you know, saying, I gotta be 40 miles away from here because I just cannot take it, which I've heard from quite a few black people. The statistics that I have seen, 80% of the people who were in those FEMA trailers were black people. So just, you know, as I said, details. If we say that this, you know, was an event of ethnic cleansing, and that's the way that I see people talk about it, and I think that's accurate, we should know some of the details as to how that played out, and how that's played out not just in the immediate week or month of the storm, but how that's played out over the past 10 years, because there's an abundance of evidence. We'll have more tomorrow. Gary Rippling, book study session. But I just thought it was a really powerful. It's just a really powerful documentary, even though, as I said, it's 2008, so it's a little bit older now, but just documents a great stretch of time. The Mr. Gettridge and his wife Lydia, they have both passed away, but he lived to be 92. So I mean, just, man, that is incredible for him to be at that age and just seeing what he did and hanging in and getting things done. And then along the way, he's kind of offering his opinion on things related to Katrina and the recovery and Mayor Nagin. It's just really, really, really fascinating documentary. It's one of the better ones that I've seen related to Katrina, and there are a lot of them. But en route to inviting her on the program, and, you know, her saying that she was going to hang out with us for the evening, I was looking at her whole body of work, which is something else that I routinely encourage. As I did so, I saw that she did a film earlier this year. Early, it was about 10 years before she even did the project with the Gettridge family. Came out in the mid-'90s, called Secret Daughter. And it's kind of a autobiographical look at her own family. She has a white mom, black father, and her white mom gave her to a black family of friends, right, to take care of, raise, you know, when she was 3. It just kind of documents this narrative of how her parents met, what their upbringing was like, what it was like when they were dating, and all that stuff, and then what it looked like the time that they were together, her being with this other family, how that played out. It's about a 2-hour documentary, so you get a lot of detail, like how this played out, her making this request that her mom come and talk about this, because, you know, there had been trepidation about publicly her white mom acknowledging that this was her daughter, this black female. So, I mean, it covers a lot of that. And then I think the idea for this happens during the middle of the O.J. Simpson trial in California, which is 20-year anniversary of that too. But I think the idea for this happens then, so that's coming up as a part of the discussion, like at the beginning when they are talking about this and they're picking the jury, and then all the way through the verdict comes out, they're still talking and they're, you know, talking about the verdict in the case. And her white mom said, and I think this was back, you know, when they were still picking the jury, the case hadn't even started. She said, "I think he'll get off. I think Nicole will be punished. I think she'll be punished as a white woman who violated the white code of engaging in sexual intercourse and especially marrying a black male. I think, you know, that'll be part of the punishment, that, you know, whatever, you got killed, that's what you deserve. You should have followed the code." She said that was her prediction about what was going to happen based on her own experience and her understanding of racism as a white woman. It was profound little moment in the film. The whole film, it was fascinating. Like I said, I hadn't heard about this film. No one had mentioned it, and it was startling because we've had so many programs that are similar to that, to the narrative that she laid out. Folks remember the broadcast we had with Dave Myers. I think that was back in the summer of 2013. I messaged him about the program today because I wanted him to hear her story. Dave Myers, the black male, he grew up out here, Washington State. His parents, his mom was having an affair with a black guy, got pregnant, told him that he had some sort of skin condition that made his skin really dark, and so that's what he grew up believing for like the first, I think, 20 years of his life or what have you, before you know, he gets the truth. And just, you have to go back and listen, but fascinating incident. I already mentioned Lacey Schwartz. We had her on the program the end of last year, where her mom was having an affair with a black guy, I guess for a long period of time, before and after she was married. Gets pregnant by this black male, and just, you know, lies about it and just says that it's her husband, her white husband's child, and, you know, everybody just goes along with this, even though from the film, and as I suspected, there were many white people who did not agree with this, who just said that is not possible. I think this child is adopted or something. Something is not right because this child is not white, and what you all are saying does not add up. There were white people in the film who expressed that they had suspicions all along that, you know, this was whatever. Anyway, but yeah, Lacey doesn't find out about this until I think she's 18, 20 years old, when she comes back and has this discussion with her mom, and her mom spills the beans about, you know, the truth about everything. So, and I think we had suggested back then, I think definitely by the time Lacey Schwartz was on the program, that there are enough of these stories that I think that there's likely been a lot of this down through the years where white people have gotten pregnant by a black person, and just, you know, whatever they had to do, whether they just gave the child up for adoption or pawned them off or lied about it, whatever the case need to be, that this has probably been replicated a lot down through the years in terms of how the sexual intercourse thing pops up. That was another thing I was going to make sure that I mentioned as well. I'll double check again to make sure I'm not missing Miss Cross. If you are here with us, just press *6 and we'll nab you on the line. If you are here, just press *6. That way I'll be able to pick out which line is yours and get you on the line. I was looking for either of your the lines that I had and the lines that I had for you, and I didn't see either one of them. So if you are with us, just press *6 and we will get you on the line. *6 and then 1. *6 and then 1, and we'll get you on the line. But yeah, that was one of the points I was going to make sure that I brought up, the sexual intercourse, the reason why I say on the Saturday program that no Area 8, because it is ubiquitous. It comes up all the time. There are tons of opportunities. There are going to be tons of opportunities to talk about that. That's something that already gets a lot of attention in comparison to other things that I think are just as important in terms of education for black children, minimizing conflict with other non-white people, dealing with racism on the job. I mean, there are a whole litany, economic issues, just all areas of people activity that, we don't spend, in my view, we don't spend nearly as much time and don't have this, certainly don't, in my experience, have the same zeal and excitement for discussing that are, in my view, every bit as important as Area 8. Just my observation. But yeah, it's going to come up. You will get, that train is always on time. You have no worry about that. There's always going to be ample time to discuss Area 8. Moving forward, in her absence, it's about 5:30. I have not heard back from her. I have my messages open. I haven't heard back from her and all that. As I said, I confirmed. We messaged within the last 16 hours that, yes, going down, doing the program. She's calling in. Gave her the number. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Hope everything is well. Hope she's doing well, doing better than well, actually. And, if we can reschedule down the road, we will see about that. Anywho, at least 2 of the clips that I was going to make sure I played, I was going to ask her about this first clip. This is not from the film about Katrina. This is from the film about her own upbringing. So this is her white mom talking about her experience living with a black male and living predominantly around black people. She wrote her mom to say, that she found this wonderful guy and they're hanging out and it's great. And oh, by the way, he's a Negro. And she said she didn't hear back from her for like 3 months after that. Anyway, so she goes on to talk about that experience being a white person living around black people. And it reminded me of Lacey Schwartz's mom in her film. That's one. And I can tell you on the other side of the clip. I'll play the clip and then I'll share my thoughts. So this is June Cross, her white mom, giving her thoughts.
Do you ever look in the mirror and ask yourself, what the hell am I doing?
No.
Why not?
I've always wanted to travel around and be a part of society. Never, traveling and being on the outside looking in. In a way, those years that I spent with Jimmy were years that I was in a foreign country. And I was in it. I remember I just laughed all the time when I was with Jimmy. He was so funny, and I found living in the black world and with the black experience, they just looked at things entirely different than white people did. They were just so devil-may-care. Had such a cavalier attitude about anything.
You seem to feel that blacks have a more happy-go-lucky attitude.
Oh, I do think that. There's such happiness and such warmth and such love within the black world. You don't get that a lot with white people. White people tend to judge each other more, I think, than blacks do. Blacks will almost accept you right away for what you are, what you lay on the table. These are my cards, this is me, and they'll accept you. White people can be, you have to prove yourself. They're a little more suspicious.
You mean y'all are like that with each other, too?
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was just something. I thought it was just us.
No. That's the way it is.
Fascinating clip. It was fascinating because even in the profoundness, and I had to explain what I found profound about it, the profoundness of that, I've heard that before. It almost sounded like a white person saying that they were on safari and exploring and just having a grand old time. And I just want to, in fact, I was speaking with Mr. Fuller, and he was explaining, he was saying that practicing, let's see if we have, I think that's Thomas in New York. I got all excited, like, oh yes, we have Miss Cross, and good to hear from Thomas in New York. We'll get that in a minute. But yeah, I was speaking with Mr. Fuller, and he was explaining, he was saying that in his view, racist man, racist woman, it's not even about accumulating things. Like sometimes you'll hear people say, well, if we get rid of racism, that would require white people to give up a lot. That, nobody wants to lose their stuff, their house or cars or other valuables, money and all that stuff. They don't want to give all that up. And he said that, it is not about that at all. He said, number one, getting rid of racism would not require them to get rid of any of that stuff, to lose any of that stuff. That would not be required at all. And second, accumulating things is not the driving, motivating force for the practice of racism. He said this really is about having fun, abusing and mistreating black people. And I said, wow, like how did you come to that conclusion? And he said, just pay attention, see what's in your face every day. Just look around you, look at the things that they do, things that they brag about, what do they teach about. And he said it's been my experience that white people, they will pile up a lot of stuff, tons of it, where they'll have to get storage closets and whole different storage space to accumulate stuff, and have garage sales and accumulate it. And then, they get tired of it and just take it all and dump it down at the Goodwill, or fill up 2 or 3 different landfills and then go get more stuff and bring it all in. Like he said, I've seen this my whole life. And he said, it's not about things, it is about having fun. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, now what about all of the complaints where white people say, we don't want these immigrants, non-white people here. We don't want black people living around us. We got to have ghettos and stuff. Going through all these efforts to make sure that black people don't live around them. He said, exactly, absolutely. And he said, and then you watch what happens after a while. They get out, it's all white people, and they have their big lawn and their big house and 2 cars and the garage and all of that. And they do that for a while, and it's boring around here. I'm ready to go. Let's go hang out with the black people. And they come back and they gentrify they go gentrify the area. He's like, I've seen this. They do this. This is the whole pattern. They just keep doing the same thing. Like their whole purpose, they have made this about having fun, mistreating black people. Like that outweighs everything. Having fun, getting some sort of glory or worship or praise out of doing this. And then third, material gain, which I've said consistently. I've heard Dr. Campbell, I think those are really the few people that I hear saying that it is not class. It is not about money. You are sorely mistaken if that's what you think it is. But that was one. Her traveling, it was totally, I'm going to have my fun hanging out with the black people. The second thing that stood out, it was profound, but I've heard this so many times. We've talked about this in detail on the program. In my view, white people, they know the damage that has been done to us. They know the degree to which we have been brain trashed in the system of white supremacy. They know the adulation, the worship, just having a white person who comes around us and is not talking bad to us, is not calling us a nigger, is hanging out. Oh my God. I mean, for so many of us, just that acceptance. I've read that passage from Frantz Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask. For so many black people, that is just, it's huge. It's an incredible drug almost. Just to have that. And so it's no coincidence to have a white person who can go and be around black people and they're just treated like royalty. Of course they're not. No one is arrogant or mean. Everyone is just nice and happy and all of this. Of course, that's the way that they're treating. I've heard Mr. Fuller, I think I played the audio clip where he's talking to a white woman. And she almost said verbatim the exact same thing, that black people are not arrogant, that they're not uptight, that they're not all suspicious of you and everything, that they're just welcoming. And she said almost the exact same thing. And Mr. Fuller was like, that is odd. My experience is that black people have no problem being arrogant or uppity or mean with other black people. Do you think you being white could be impacting how black people are behaving in your presence? And the white woman obviously had to say, yes, that's a possibility. Of course, that's what's happening. And I even, just my view, I suspect that most white people, they know this. They know we've talked about this, particularly white people, I would say, especially white women, who any sort of abuse or where they have been mistreated by other white people, so now they, are resentful or mistrustful of other white people. A lot of times, particularly white women, they will go and they can find refuge amongst black people, where they can be accepted and treated well. We've had examples of that, numerous examples of that on the program. I remember Darren Smith, his white friend, Dr. Garza. We had her on the program. I think that was the early part of 2014. Same thing. History of abuse. I think she also had some weight issues, and she ended up being in a sex. I think she married, not just sexual arrangement. She ended up marrying a non-white person. But we've had this pattern presented on the program numerous times before. It is ubiquitous within the system of white supremacy. Even continue within that, just that one little 1 minute, 30 second clip or whatever it was, when she gets to the end and she talked about appreciating the fact that black people just accept you. This is who I am. You put your cards on the table, this is who I am, and they just accept you. They don't have all that suspicion like white people do. And that was June Cross. This is the white woman's daughter interviewing her, and she says, oh, wow, I thought that was just us. And she says, oh, no. I found that, white people, and I think she said white people are more suspicious. And I have said that verbatim on this program before. White people are way more suspicious of other white people than black people are under the system of white supremacy. And to me, that's just logical. White people see how white people get down all the time. Like they're seeing their other, family members and friends, they're hearing them making racist comments, they're seeing them mistreat black people and the things that they do to abuse black people and allow this to happen. They know this is a big criminal organization, and of course this leaks over to mistreating other white people. So of course, to me it's just logical, it's obvious that they're going to be way more suspicious of white people. They have a much better understanding of racism, white supremacy than black people. That's logical. Anywho, fascinating minute, 30 second clip. There are other, like I said, it's a 2-hour documentary. There's so many different, just amazing portions. I was chomping at the bit to ask her. There's a segment in the film where she's talking with her mom, and she talks about, it took some years to process all of this and to kind of even wrap her head around what happened and just making sense of it all. And she said, she's talking with her mom, her white mom, and her mom says, when did you think of yourself as a black person? Like, you were not restricted. Nobody, when you were with me, nobody ever said that you couldn't do this or, stopped you from doing this because you're a black person. You could do whatever you wanted and blah, blah, blah. At what point did you feel that you were a black person? And I the only reason I didn't make a sound clip of it is because I was just going to ask. I was going to ask so she could explain it and then, give her additional commentary around it. But she says that she was taking a bubble bath with her white mother, and her mom says, if you weren't so dark, you could stay with me. And she said in that moment, she like really intensifies the moment in the film because she shows like a bubble bath. And so it's just like this oasis of whiteness, right? Because the bubbles are white and the tub is white. And so you're in all this whiteness. And it's like, yeah, if you just didn't have all that melanin, you could stay here. But you're black, so you got to go back with the black people. I mean, it's just a crushing moment. This is a child. Like, this is not, an older, I mean, even, I wouldn't care what age you are. That would be a crushing moment to take from your mom, the person who is responsible for 50% of your genetic material. But, I mean, to get this as a child, like, whew. And I mean, there are quite a few moments that are just staggering like that in this film, which is like, it's like a 2-hour film. Like I said, you get a lot of details. So there are a lot of moments like this. I think another one that I was going to ask her about, that's why I didn't sound clip it. She's talking about when she's moved to New Jersey. Her mom was in New York. They moved her to a black family in New Jersey, and she's 3. She's not understanding that, oh, this is like permanent. Like, my white mom is gone forever. Or not, I mean, she still sees her, but, I'm no longer staying with her. Like, I'm going to be here permanently. Like, her grasping what this means. Oh, man, it's tragic, man. Tragic arrangement. It reminded me when Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, when she says, when you play around with sex, the joke is on the offspring. And just, you can compound that in this one. Those exactly why Mr. Fuller references them as tragic arrangements. I mean, just, man, all the way around. Even when it gets to the end, the situation with her white mom and her black father, her father, Jimmy Cross, who was a brilliant entertainer and who did all these acts and was performing and was really well known. And I have a clip about it, her dad as well. But her dad, eventually, when television becomes really big and you have a lot of white people blowing up on television, and they make it really, really difficult for black people, no matter how talented you are, they make it really, really difficult for, if not impossible, for a black person to get on television, much less be successful on television. Still the case today, 2015, unless you want to kiss a white woman, Viola Davis. So her dad, like, his career is just going in the toilet. Racism, white supremacy then and now dominates Hollywood. And he's becoming an alcoholic and taking this really bad, not taking care of himself. And he's abusing June Cross's white mother. And I guess when it gets to the final point where her mom has decided, I'm out of here. This is over with permanently. I'm taking my daughter and I'm leaving. I think he hit her. He knocked her down. He knocked her down the steps. I will definitely pause, get in Mr. Fuller. First time, last time, that should be up front. Within the first time you're getting to know somebody, and it might be any sort of arrangement. This is going to be a quote-unquote dating situation. Get that out immediately. First time, last time. And everybody, males and females, can be saying this to make sure that is understood without, any ambiguity. First time, last time, no putting of hands to be tolerated at all for any reason. That's it. So her father has abused her mom. She says she's been knocked down the stairs. She's holding June Cross, who's a child at this point, small child. And she says to just finalize and stamp that this is over, she calls him a nigger, tells him to get out of the house, and he just goes ballistic at this point and beats her really bad. She arranges to get away from him, and they report that just devastated him, losing her because he cared about her so much, and now she's, out of his life. She went on to marry a white person. In fact, you're going to hear so this would be June Cross's stepfather in the following clip. He's talking about Jimmy Lewis, and not just Jimmy Lewis. There were quite a few white entertainers. This reminded me Bruce Fine. She's commented before about theft. I think many people have, about how white people, they constantly are stealing from black people. I mean, just habitually, just take any and everything that we do. They just come in, steal it, take it, and then they wait about 5 years and claim it as theirs, that we're the ones who invented this. We've always been doing it. We've been doing it for the last 10,000 years, and we've got a book right here that says so. Like, they do this all the time. But he's talking about how Jimmy Lewis and many of these other white entertainers white comedians, white singers, they would come and they would listen to black comedians. They would go to like the Apollo in New York. They would go to the Apollo Theater, listen to these black acts, because I guess a lot of white people did not go to some of this is explained in the clip, but he's just talking about this. And just profound moment of racism. It'll really stand out in the clip. I will play that, and then if folks have any other comments or anything that they want to make sure that they get in, we should have time for that as well. I'll get that quick clip. His Larry Storch, that's her stepfather. He was on television programs and I guess was really popular actor back in the day, white guy. I think Larry Storch, that's his name, but he's the one that's going to be talking in this segment of the clip, just kind of explaining how you'll even get to hear from Jimmy Lewis. I'll hush, play the clip, Context of White Supremacy.
If you were wise, if you were smart, and you could glam on to what Jimmy Cross was laying down, you picked it up. I did.
Was part of that a lot of white audiences weren't seeing the black acts because of the fact?
No, they never went uptown. They went uptown, but not to the Apollo. They went up to the Baby Grand and the Cotton Club, Savoy, places like that.
So the white showbiz acts could go to the Apollo, check out the best of it.
Check them out, sure.
And then bring it back and kind of comfortably
comfortably ooze it into your act.
Right.
If you could.
Yeah.
If you could.
Among the regulars at the Apollo was Jerry Lewis.
The black community, they loved the clown. They knew of what I took from their culture, which was their comic sense of timing, their ability for self-deprecating humor, which is everything I used, their rhythm in comic timing. I mean, I learned from some pretty good people.
Lewis told me he watched those black comic acts the way a biologist examines slides.
Context of White Supremacy. Fascinating. Again, another one where I said, even in that moment of what I think is significant commentary, same boilerplate, standard operating procedure in the system of white supremacy in terms of the theft of black genius, black intellectual property, whether it's comedy routines, whether it's certainly music, long legacy of that. This dancing, this long tradition of theft that involves so many other aspects as well. I thought even the use of words and how it gets described, even before I get to that, when he touched on the self-deprecation, that was another one that I thought was a result of a system of white supremacy. In fact, I think white people have required what he termed self-deprecation. They have paid us handsomely in many cases to what he calls self-deprecate, to make fun of yourself, to reject black self-respect, or to make fun of other black people. They have demanded that we perform those kind of quote-unquote self-deprecating acts, sometimes at gunpoint. I think there was a report of a black person. This was within like the last 2 years. For a lot of this stuff, you don't have to go way back. This was within the last 2 years of a black person. He was stopped by enforcement officials, and he said that they demanded that he perform for them at gunpoint, threatened him, perform for us. I'll find the link, once I get a free second to look online. But this is recent. This is like within, like I said, the last 3-4 years that this sort of thing happened. That is a result of the system of white supremacy and something that white people have extracted out of us over centuries now. They go on to talk about that in more detail in the film, Jerry Lewis making all this money and great career, and then black people being locked out. Even Nat King Cole being locked out and not given the same opportunities. Even his running pal, Sammy Davis Jr., all the racism that he encountered at the time. Another cowbell would be there as well. Nat King Cole as well. But talking about, it was kind of bad and racism did exist, but I wouldn't quite call it thieving. It was paying homage, and the black people appreciated what I did. They recognized my characters that were kind of mimicking or showing how much I respected their work. They knew what I was doing. It was great. They the same sort of way of minimizing it. I think M1, he talks about that when white people, that's the essence of what it means to be white to him, in terms of white people always being able to minimize their malfeasance, and it does not get described accurately. It does not get described with the same types of words. It's always some way to obfuscate and be euphemistic about how we're going to talk about their misdeeds, frequently abusing and terrorizing black people. But it many fascinating moments. As I said, I didn't know about this film. I'd never heard about it. It is older. This film came out, I believe, in 1996. So it is, almost 20 years now. But I encourage folks consistently check out the whole body of work. If it's someone and they've done films or they have a history on television, look at some of their other projects. It can be very telling. I think you can get a better sense of an artist or a writer or a filmmaker if you can kind of step back and take a broad view of their work. It might even help you get a better interpretation of an individual work if it's a particular film or book or piece that you're looking at. But I was just looking at her bio and saw this other film, Secret Daughter, and was like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. And amazing, amazing. I'm bummed. I wish she'd been able to participate. Again, Ms. Cross, if you are with us on the line, press *6. Would love to chat it up and go over some of your fantastic work. *6. You can press 1. I've been looking for your line. I haven't seen it, and message, didn't get anything back. If you are with us, press *6 and then 1, *6 and then 1, and we'll get you on the line. I hope I've said before, let's see if we have her here. Ms. Cross, are you with us?
You do. I'm sorry, I didn't know how this thing worked.
Bravo, outstanding. Have you been here hanging out the whole time?
Probably about 10 or 15 minutes or so. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Didn't realize you were going to talk about Secret Daughter. I was sort of... Anyway. Hi, how are you, Gus?
I'm hanging in and doing great. Glad to have you on the broadcast for our listeners who... I guess if you have been here for the last bit of the program, you've been hearing me talk about her fantastic work. She did the film Secret Daughter, came out in 1996. I didn't know I was going to talk about that either, but I was telling them, just trying to be thorough and preparing for you spending some time with us. I decided, hey, I will check out as much as I can of your fantastic body of work. It is, wow, how could I not talk about it now that I've seen it? And certainly we want to talk about The Old Man and The Storm as well, because that was what drew me to your work in the first place. But she's done all this fantastic work, 3 decades of work as a journalist. She is a professor at the Columbia School of Journalism, Harvard alumnus, just sterling body of work. So glad to have you with us, June Cross.
Glad to be here.
For sure.
Apologies for yesterday.
We are thankful that you arrived. Glad to have you with us. Anything that you'd like to share with folks that you think it's important that they know about your work before we get started?
I just finished a film about AIDS in the rural, black folks and AIDS and lack of access to health care for a variety of reasons in the rural South. AIDS is an epidemic that is still hurting us here in the United States, and African Americans are 80% of the new cases, and over half of us are in the South, in the 9 southern states of the Deep South. So that's going to be on PBS next year sometime. I can't quite come up with a date yet, but I just finished it a couple of months ago, and it's just signed the contract yesterday, so it's going to be on PBS next year.
Congratulations. Outstanding. Public health, private pain, is that the project?
It's actually called Wilhelmina's War. We renamed it, and they want to rename it again. I haven't quite I haven't agreed to the renaming a third time yet, but we'll see.
We will be on the lookout. Outstanding. How do you self-classify when you fill out any forms and they ask for racial classification? How do you self-identify?
African American.
Right on.
Or black or whatever.
Okay. That's been consistent? You've been uniform with that?
Yeah, that's been consistent. I was dragged finally into people who introduced me publicly, and since Secret Daughter came out, that I'm now biracial. I always was biracial, but that's sort of a red herring because it's not, I don't know, I just never felt like that, you know. I think all of Americans, every American has got something of something else, and this whole race thing is crap and bull-twinky in the first place. Am I allowed to curse on this show? I guess not. I don't care. But, so yes, I have consistently identified as African American or black.
Right on. What definition do you use for the term racism?
I think of structural institutional and structural racism as a system that consciously and unconsciously conspires to keep African Americans from actualizing their own power. Do I need to break that down in English?
I think I got you. I was going to restate it back to you to just make sure I'm clear. A system.
It's an institutional and a structural system. So there's institutional laws, there's institutional traditions, and then there's structural laws that keep black Americans sort of under the thumb of the power establishment, which in this country is white.
Okay. Are black people able to practice racism against white people, or any non-white people able to practice racism?
No, because we don't have any of those structures. We can be prejudiced against white people, and we could discriminate against white people in some instances, but we don't have access to the reins of power to really do the kinds of things that have been done to us. You know, so like if you go back to the beginning of the New Deal, things like aid to families with dependent children, which is otherwise now known as welfare, was begun, and black women weren't even allowed on welfare when that thing began in the 40s. If you look at the GI Bill, black people weren't allowed to buy houses under the GI Bill. Black people weren't allowed to go to school, to the same schools that white people were allowed to go to under the GI Bill as part of the education part of the GI Bill in the 40s. So when we talk about a system in which most of the wealth of America is created through housing, we're talking about blacks being systemically excluded from participating in getting that wealth. And when you look at who's actually on welfare, the percentages, it's like, you know, the way huge percentage more of whites than African Americans on welfare. There's a structural problem that has to do with access to decent education. And education really teaches you anything. I mean, this entire country has gotten to the point where nobody's getting an education anymore, but access to a decent education, access to a safe neighborhood so that you can go to and from school without worrying about getting shot, access to a place where you can live without having to worry about bullets coming through your windows. There's an issue there that is keeping black and brown people down. Access to neighborhoods where police don't treat you as though you're a criminal when you walk outside your house. All that.
Absolutely. Speaking of bullets, as I said, we had every intention to get my questions in about The Old Man and the Storm, but I watched Secret Daughter, amazing film, profound commentary on race. if you could kind of ground us in the context for why you decided to do that film, and the context being the beginning of the infamous O.J. Simpson trial and how that influenced the dialogue and what you and your mom were discussing.
Oh, right. It actually went back further than that. It started with the Rodney King riots, which predated O.J., I believe, if I have this right.
Yes, ma'am.
So it really started with a conversation, an editorial meeting that we were having at Frontline about race and how to tackle race in some way that felt different. And I said, I thought that we did not need to do another story where black people sort of complained about the impact of race. What we needed to do was examine why white people were so neurotic about race. And so then it fell to me as the lone black producer to try to figure out how we were going to do that. So I was trying to think about what white people I knew that would be honest with me, because normally I show up and people start saying all the liberal claptrap that they usually say. And it took me quite a while, actually. It took the better part of about 18 months before I finally decided to actually just do the story of my life. I had always thought, I was thinking at first that I would interview biracial families. The term biracial had just come into sort of common usage, and I was thinking, well, maybe, people who've lived on this color line can sort of describe what it's like. And I couldn't quite ever pull it together in the way that I really wanted to pull it together. And then one day I was talking to my executive producer about the whole thing, and I began talking about my own life story, which actually up till then I hadn't said to anybody. And he said, "Have you ever thought about making a film about this?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And it took a couple of months. It took me about 3 or 4 months, actually, and I went off and I did another film in between, which was about AFD welfare. Well, this is when Clinton was getting ready to, change welfare as we know it. And then I came back and I did Secret Order. So it started with the O.J. trial. Mom believed O.J. was innocent, and I thought he was guilty. So it was already sort of, we were already backwards. And she really believed that he was going to get off because the jury would feel that any white woman that was married to a black man had, deserved whatever she got, basically. That was her attitude. And that's what that was the lesson that she had taken away from the 5 years she lived with my dad. That
Wow.
her skin, she gave up that privilege of white skin when she began living with him.
Wow. Number one, was it that your mom thought that he was innocent and that he would be exonerated as a result of, this white girl is going to be punished because she had sex with a black or married a black guy, or was it that she really didn't think he committed this crime?
It was sort of both, and I didn't know. I tried to parse that out. I just thought that it was being a reporter. I was on the wrong side of this. If my black credential was based on is O.J., but I think O.J. is innocent. Our family was just crazy, because I was from the beginning. I was like, he did it. Of course he did it, And she was like, no, he didn't. He's innocent. She had met him. In fact, at one point, I remember she met him at a dinner party, and she called me up and she told me to go buy a sexy dress and come to dinner the next night. She wanted to introduce me to O.J. Simpson, and I said, no, I'm not going to go meet O.J. Simpson. Athletes were never really my type. And so I refused to go, and then I reminded her that when all of this happened, we had a big laugh about it.
Wow, that is fascinating. Do you, to her statement about giving up her whiteness, do you think that's accurate, that by her experience with your father at any time, do you think she forfeited?
I think in the 50s, a white woman who was living with a black man did surrender that white privilege. She kept a part of it, and that once she left him and got rid of me, she was able to go back to that sense of privilege. So there was sort of she always had that escape hatch, but as long as she was living with him as his wife, she was not going to be. She wasn't considered. She didn't feel that she was considered
she had lost that sense of privilege. Now, I have an older brother who said she remembers that she was sort of, or she used to remember, she passed in 2003. So she would remember that she was often sort of shouted at or looked down upon by other black women. But my brother was, he's 15 years older than me. He remembers that it was 10 times worse in the white community than it was in the black community. So
he said that in the film.
I was only a child. I wasn't there.
Right.
I don't remember.
Right. I remember he said that in the film. You put it on a scale of like 0 to 10. And he was saying racism, and he was saying that in the white community it was like 10 or 8 or 9, and in like the black areas it was like a 1
20,
or
right?
2. He said it was a lot lower.
Yeah.
In the black it was like a 1 or a 2. It was very low. They could go, and then your mom came on and she said that as long as you all stayed in Harlem around black people, you all were fine. Or not you all, but your mom and your dad, they were fine.
That was true.
And then when you ventured out and it was around white people, that was when the problem came. And my segue, at least in my view, I don't think that's accurate to say that for your mom, even the time period, even we're saying like 50s, 60s, even for then to say that a white woman, if you're engaged in a sexual arrangement with a black male, that you are forfeiting your whiteness, even then I don't think that is true, because being a white person is not just about how you are treated by other white people. It also involves how you interact and are treated by other black people. And I would go to the clip. I thought this is really significant. This is your mom, and she's talking about just this, being a white woman and living around black people, to kind of make my point. Then I want to get your comments on this as well. But this is your mom talking about being a white woman living around black people in this time period, from the film Secret Daughter.
Do you ever look in the mirror and ask yourself, what the hell am I doing?
No.
Why not?
I've always wanted to travel around and be a part of society. Never, traveling and being on the outside looking in. In a way, those years that I spent with Jimmy were years that I was in a foreign country. And I was in it. I remember I just laughed all the time when I was with Jimmy. He was so funny, and I found living in the black world and with the black experience, they just looked at things entirely different than white people did. They were just so devil-may-care. Had such a cavalier attitude about anything.
You seem to feel that blacks have a more happy-go-lucky attitude.
Oh, I do think
towards
that.
life.
There's such happiness and such warmth and such love within the black world. You don't get that a lot with white people. White people tend to judge each other more, I think, than blacks do. Blacks will almost accept you right away for what you are, what you lay on the table. These are my cards, this is me, and they'll accept you. White people can be, you have to prove yourself. They're a little more suspicious.
You mean y'all are like that with each other, too?
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was just something. I thought it was just us.
No. That's the way it is.
The cows, June Cross. Does that statement sound like she's describing a white woman who has taken off her whiteness while she was around black people with your father?
Well, you have to remember she's talking 40 years after the fact by the time I did this film.
For sure. But even with that, does that sound like she's, talking about someone who had taken off their whiteness for that period of time?
During the period of time that she lived with Jimmy, she did take off her whiteness. When she left him, she made a conscious choice to rejoin the white world. And she made that was 45 years before I did this film. So yeah, I do believe that she surrendered it at that for the 5 years that she lived with him, from 1949 to 54. Yeah, I did this film in 1996, so it was more than 45 years, 40-something years. Yeah, I was 45. So, yeah, I would say yes. I'd say it's a shallow understanding, because the only black folks she really came in contact with were in the showbiz world. So black people in the showbiz world would have been, even within the black community, I grew up in a very stable, the way I survived this whole thing was I was raised by a very stable middle-class black family. Peggy was a teacher, and Uncle Paul drove a cab, and he was a clerk for the county. I was never even allowed to go near the area of Atlantic City where my father worked all the time. There was, so she doesn't have a deep understanding of the black community. She's going on what she experienced while she was with him.
Right. Do you think the limited amount of black people that she was around, including your father, do you think at any point during this time period that they lost sight of the fact that she was a white woman?
Probably not, because we live in America,
Right.
But I know, like, Carmen McRae knew who she was, knew who I was for years afterwards, and they were very friendly. I know, I have since, while I was making the film and afterwards, I met people who knew her, and she was sort of regular. They felt she was like a little white girl from Idaho, a little lost, but I'm not going to argue with what her perception was of that time, since I didn't live there. I wasn't even alive then.
Right.
I wasn't born. By the time I was born, she had already made a decision to leave, and I was 18 months old when she did leave. So I can't really, I'm not in a position to judge and get inside her head. I know what kind of person she was. She was a person who valued status. She valued that privilege that she had both as a white woman and the wife of a entertainer or a star. That was stuff that she was into. My dad was a star within the world of the black community, and the man that she ultimately married after she left him 10 years later, Larry Storch, was another star. So she was very attached to all that stuff.
Right.
And whether or not you're black or white, some people are just attached to being status seekers and attached to material things, and that's the way they are. I know black people like that.
Right. What can you describe the process of your mom, unloading you to this black middle-class family in New Jersey at 3 years old?
Well, it was the apartment that they rented when my dad worked in Atlantic City. When was this? So this was when he was working with Stump and Stumpy. I was born in 1954. Things began to go downhill with his career around that time because I think this is the segment you were playing when I got online, because of television and the fact that blacks could not work on television. Black comedians particularly could not work on television. Even Sammy Davis broke in first as a tap dancer. And my dad was primarily a comedian. He was a comedian who could dance, but his stock and trade was comedy. Live television liked comedians because they were very quick on their feet, and stuff was always going wrong with TV in those early days. So Jimmy basically couldn't work anymore because, you do the show once and then everybody knows what it is, and you had to make up another show, and that just wasn't, it was sort of, everybody was having troubles with this at that time. So anyway, he stopped working. He began drinking. He was an angry drunk. He would beat her. When he beat her, she would leave. She would go stay with this family in Atlantic City, who I came to call on Peggy and Uncle Paul. So when she made the decision that she wanted to go back to regain her privilege of being white, totally, she started leaving me there for sort of longer and longer periods. And I don't know if this is clear in the film, but my older brother, the brother who's 15 years older than me, he was also left with the same family. And so we both would stay there for periods of time. And he actually wanted to live there, but my aunt, Peggy, thought it would be too complicated for a white boy to be living in a black neighborhood in Atlantic City, and she didn't want to deal with all of that. So, this razor, what I call this razor of race, cut both ways. My mom finally decided to leave me with Aunt Peggy and Uncle Paul, and my white brother ended up in a foster home. So I can't sit here and tell you that one of the other of us got the rawest end of it. We both got raw ends of this deal in different kinds of ways. Race in this country sort of hurts everybody.
Man, white women do it better. the hashtag from earlier this year. I am reminded of it often.
I don't know what that is even about, but whatever.
That
was somebody who had her hair. It wasn't Miley Cyrus. Who was it? It was one of those other ones, right?
I think that was a part of it as well, but it's kind of been a running discussion on racism and particularly how white women at times practice racism. I wanted particularly, I thought, two great moments in the film. You were talking about just the metaphor. If you could unpack this metaphor, you said black women have an interesting relationship with their hair, kind of like the one I have with my white mother. Can you unpack what you mean with this metaphor?
Oh, Lord. Well, how many black women do you know that know what their natural hair looks like? That's what I mean, I mean, we grow up surrounded by Barbie dolls. I mean, this generation doesn't. They got, even Beyonce. I mean, how much of that hair that Beyonce has is Beyonce's hair, but whatever. I won't go there for right now. Black women are always trying to figure out what to do with the hair. So is it going to be weaved? What kind of weave am I going to have? Am I going to have braids? Am I going to have the Indian hair? Am I going to have the Malaysian hair? Am I going to have just whatever funky, excuse me, I'm sorry, my cat just jumped on my lap with his claws. Sort of funky fake hair. There's just a whole, now more women are beginning to think about going natural, but now I have dreadlocks, and when I leave New York or go to the South, I go anywhere outside of the sort of the coast, New York, Atlanta, L.A., San Francisco, environs, people look at me strange because it's still weird to see a black woman walking around with real hair, with her own hair. And I always get from some kinds of black women, how does your hair grow so long? I was like, well, if you stop perming it to death, it'll grow, So, I mean, between the perms and the weaves and all this and all that, it's we have it. I could say it's a neurotic relationship with our hair if I was writing those words now from hindsight 20 years later. It's like there's always this element of, because as women we've been fed this image of white womanhood that is thin with straight long hair that you can flip and, do whatever it is you do with long straight hair, that we have turned ourselves inside out trying to figure out how to make our hair be something that it's not. I've gone through a lot around this whole issue with hair. I finally reached the point where I think it's just hair. It'll grow back. What's that song by India.Arie? I Am Not My Hair. But, it's still, I mean, I still meet women almost every day, black women every day, are talking about, what do I do with my hair? What do I do with my hair? What do I do with my hair? And it's not in the same way that white women talk about what to do with their hair.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How does that transfer to your relationship with your white mother?
Well, my white mother died 12 years ago. So, you mean within the context of the film, or are you talking about in 2015?
Well, both, if it has evolved within the context of the film and then, where it stands presently.
Well, I mean, Mom was this sort of beautiful, svelte creature, looked like Katharine Hepburn a little bit. And here I am, she called me, I forgot what the word was. She said I was a something shader, another version of her, but I really wasn't. I'm stockier than she is. I'm thick, so I'm not ever going to be built the way my mom was built. So when you're a little girl, everybody wants to look like their mom, right? So it's a difficult thing when you're a child to try to figure out, well, what does this mean for how I look? How do I be pretty when this person that I'm looking at is held up on all the magazine covers as the paradigm of beauty in the world? So it takes a long time to try to work all that through, and then I had all this other stuff that I had to work through just from the way I was raised in terms of sort of being left with Aunt Peggy and Uncle Paul. Unfortunately, that whole family, the Gregory family that raised me, Gregory's and Aunt Peggy and Uncle Paul, I mean, all of them, without that, I would be sort of some kind of version of Rachel Dolezal. I really believe that. And black love is what kept me sane. So anyway, I'm going to field here. I'm not quite sure how I'm answering it. How would I deal with it now? I mean, she's gone. So I've had to, we spoke the day before she died. She and I had a conversation, and she never really said I'm sorry, but she said she wanted to come back as a better person in her next life, and I knew what she meant. And there was a lot between us that you can't put in a 2-hour documentary, and we had a relationship. A lot of what was in our relationship couldn't be put in a 2-hour documentary, so I'm clear that she loved me, and she was trying to figure out to do the best way she could, and I loved her back, because she's my mom. I often say she was addicted to being white. Some people have moms that are addicted to clubs. Some people have moms that are addicted to drugs. My mother was addicted to being white.
What does that mean?
I don't love her any less for that.
What does that mean? How did
she was addicted to white privilege. We've been talking about this the whole time. She was addicted to white privilege.
How did she perform
everything that white privilege means.
How did that manifest in her behavior?
Well, I just did a whole 2-hour documentary about it that you've been playing.
Okay. Okay. It
manifested that she didn't want to have a brown child around her, but to be fair, she also didn't want to have her white son around her, and she had another daughter that was put up for adoption. It's not even in the documentary. So my mother was not a woman that was meant to be a mother.
Okay.
Period.
Right. That was why I wasn't sure if you were saying that, what we see in the film is an act of her practicing racism, her addiction to whiteness, because in the film, when you were questioned about it, you were saying that you thought of it more at that time as a mother-daughter issue, not a racial issue. So I wasn't clear.
I still do, actually. I still do. I can lay the racism obviously played a role in both her thought process and how she dealt with me. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Families are complicated. Everybody got some bullshit going on in their family. So, you just got to leave it there at some point.
Wow. Can you describe the moment in the film where your mom, she asks you, like, at what point, because we didn't restrict you, you could do whatever you wanted anytime you're with us, like, at what point did you start to think of yourself as a black person? Can you describe that moment?
I don't remember. I haven't seen this film in a while.
The bathtub?
I don't remember what I said in the film, but I remember once I must have been about 4 or 5 years old, and we were having a bath. And this actually came up around hair, actually, or was it around hair? I don't even remember. Hair was an issue because Aunt Peggy, my black Aunt Peggy, would straighten my hair, and then I'd go visit my mom, and she would take me swimming, and that would be the end of my straight black hair because I didn't have a perm. It was we were talking pressing my hair with a hot iron comb. So the minute I got in the water, that would be the end of that. But then what she said was if I hadn't grown darker, that I could have stayed with her. In other words, if I had been born light enough to pass, I could have stayed with her. And that's sort of the moment where I won't say that I realized that I was black, but I realized there was something different about my skin and her skin, and whatever that difference was made me something different. And I wasn't quite up to realizing what the something was. I knew there was something. There was something bad. When I began to really put a name to it that I would call black would be probably during the 1964 Democratic Convention. So I was about 10 years old, I was 10. That August when the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party came to Atlantic City and tried to get seats as delegates at the Democratic Convention and were prevented largely through the machinations of Hubert Humphrey and Lyndon Johnson. At that point, because there was so much stuff about race in the air, this is during the Civil Rights Movement, I began to realize that this was not just something between me and Mom. This was something between black people and white people. And that's when I really began to realize I was, part of this larger community.
Right on. Context of White Supremacy. I hope you're all right. Get a little water.
Yeah.
June Cross.
Yeah, I'm getting water.
Right on.
I was eating a peanut and it went down the wrong way.
Right on. No choking on the program.
Right. Okay.
Did you unpack the moment in the film where you're talking with your childhood friend and she said that she felt like you always had a certain amount of venom directed towards white people, and you said you felt like it was because you had more of an understanding of how white people think? Did you unpack that moment?
Unpack it? I don't know. I mean,
because it seemed like you were a little surprised at first when she said that you had this. She felt like you had a.
Yeah, I probably did have a blacker than now. I'm sure I went through a blacker than thou phase when I was in my 20s. We all, this is during the Black Panther period, and I'm sure that I was compensating in some kind of way with trying to be blacker than now. But though that's my aunt Sheila, who's one of the part of my extended family that raised me. She had a brother who was just as venomous as I was. So, in fact, he even gave me some more things to think about.
Such as?
When he had been a Tuskegee Airman, so he wasn't backing down for anybody.
Wow.
The whole system. I mean, he was the one that began to help me see as a young woman in college that, this was the Civil Rights Movement, the fact that the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, that these things were on paper, but there was only so many of us, so many African Americans were going to be allowed to enter the middle class. And then that tap was going to shut off, and a whole bunch of people were going to be left behind. And he saw this in 1967, 68, long before what we're now talking about is, what do they call it, structural. I know I did this film with Skip Gates, and he had the name for it. But anyway, long before we sort of could begin to see the legacy of that, he saw it then.
Wow.
So, I don't think my venom was any more or any less than most black people that had to deal with bullshit in this country. Deal with all of this crap.
Ashe.
I mean, there's so much that you dealt with. It's a wonder we all haven't picked up AKs and gone to kill somebody. And the fact that we haven't, the fact that we turn it on each other instead of taking it to the streets is the effect of the structural and institutional racism. But you were talking about that before I came on the phone.
Absolutely. 100% agreement. I wanted to make sure to get the film that I did talk about, but I know there's so much in it's a 2-hour film and all that. For listeners, if you have a question you want to ask about that, you should go ahead and get your hand up. The film that I saw first, and the whole reason that I was like, wow, should I have Miss Cross on the program? The Old Man and the Storm. Herbert Gettridge, the wizard.
Gettridge.
Amazing figure, in my opinion, phenomenal example of black self-respect. Can you kind of describe
I love Mr. Gettridge.
How can you not? How can you not? Can you describe how you met him in New Orleans?
Yeah. I'm sorry?
I said, can you describe how you met him in New Orleans?
Oh, it was the first Mardi Gras in New Orleans after Katrina. And I was walking around, and I had gone to Mardi Gras as like in my 20s, like everybody does. You stay on Bourbon Street and get drunk. What I didn't realize about Mardi Gras was that every neighborhood in New Orleans has its own version of a Mardi Gras. Everybody doesn't go downtown. Every little neighborhood has its own little spin on how they celebrate Mardi Gras. So anyway, I went over to the lower Ninth Ward, and I was sort of poking around, and there was sort of the debris left of sort of trash and beads and stuff left from Mardi Gras, and I was walking around, and then I heard this shoveling, and it was, the reason I heard it was because there was nobody there. There was no, the people had been there, had partied, and had left, and what was left was sort of this eerie silence from all of these flooded out houses. And I heard a sound, and I walked towards the sound, and it's this 85-year-old man shoveling out his front yard, and it was Herbert Gettridge. And he was a mason, a masonist, not a mason, but a mason. In other words, he made masonry. He had built a lot of the downtown buildings in New Orleans. He worked restoring the old French Quarter buildings. He was just an amazing man. He had not gone to school, I don't think, beyond the 7th grade. But he'd raised 9 children. And his wife, the house had been destroyed because it was 4 blocks from where the levee broke in the 9th Ward. So he was determined to rebuild his house, and he was sleeping on the studs of the house while he was rebuilding. And he got that house rebuilt in about 2 years and brought his wife back home. He was an amazing guy.
I totally agree, and I mean, this guy's out in his 80s doing this, and I mean, you document in the film,
He was 87 years old rebuilding a house by hand from scratch. He did run out of steam towards the end, and he had a lot of help from some of the church groups that went down there. The churches, especially the Southern Baptists and the Jehovah's Witness, did amazing work in New Orleans, helping people rebuild their houses, and almost rebuild them for damn near free. Wow. And, you know, so they helped him with, like, the walls, because by the time he got to the point where he had to put up the sheetrock for the walls and things, he was beginning to, his hands had gotten, he had arthritis in his hands anyway, because he'd been mixing cement, and, you know, I don't know, most people don't know, there's the fumes from the cement and the chemicals in the cement actually do damage to your hands after a while, and you develop a form of arthritis. So, yeah, his hands were sort of gnarly, but he got it done, and he got her in there. You know, and the poor thing, then she had a stroke, and she had some, you know, and some memory issues, so she was just giving him hell because the house wasn't exactly the way it had been when she left. I felt so bad for him that day. But anyway, they're like my second cousins now.
Wow. It's just amazing. Like I sat spellbound watching him doing all of this, and I mean, no running water, no electricity, no
electricity.
Bed.
Yeah, I mean, and that's structural racism too, structural and institutional racism.
Absolutely.
So when the city fathers sit down and say, well, what, you know, the whole city's destroyed, and we only have enough from the federal government to pay for a part of it, what parts of it are we just going to let go? And they decide to let go the parts where the black middle class lives. That's structural and institutional racism working, you know, even though all of them would say, oh, no, it's not racism, it's just that over there is where that area is below sea level, and when it rains really hard, it floods over there. And I was like, well, the reason that the black people are consigned to that part of the world in the first place is because y'all wouldn't let them live in the French Quarter. They couldn't get a house over there. So if you're telling somebody, I'm not going to allow you to live, you can't move back to the neighborhood where you lived because there were structural and institutional reasons that you were consigned to that place in the first place. And because you're over there now, the federal government is valuing your house for less than it values a house on higher ground. You know, there's all kinds of structural issues that come into play here.
Absolutely. Did Mr. Gettridge, did he express any suspicions or thoughts on whether or not the levees had been intentionally breached?
I don't think I'm trying to remember, I don't think he really thought it mattered at that point.
That's what I said.
He didn't have a house. It's sort of, I mean, I think the common wisdom on what happened over there was there was that huge barge. There was pictures of this barge everywhere. The barge that was sitting on top of the school bus.
Right.
It was a common image. So what happened was that barge had been left docked at the levee, and when the high winds came, it began to bang against the levee, and it broke at that point. And the barge ended up sitting on high ground there. The levees had been breached intentionally in 1962 when Hurricane Betsy hit. There was some thought about that, but I think as time went on, it was just that the levees failed, period. There was a sense that, you know, over the time, in other words, over the 3 to 5 years, you know how rumors begin immediately people are thinking, well, yeah, they let it happen over here. But, that barge was left there, and there was a lawsuit about why the barge was left there. But basically, it came on that one, I'm going to call human incompetence, not intentional. Because the white people that lived on the other side also got flooded out, so that you can't, if there was if that's a structural problem that applied across the board to poor people. You were just the next, what is that? St. Bernard's Parish, which is right next door to the 9th Ward, was equally destroyed. Actually, sort of worse destroyed.
Right. I have said before, I don't. St. Bernard's Parish gets no sympathy from me because they did have a lawsuit
I'm not
filed.
sympathizing. I'm just saying.
Oh, right. I think it's important for pointing out for context. St. Bernard's Parish had a lawsuit filed against them where it was actually a multi-million-dollar judgment against them for deliberately structural racism that you've been talking about, deliberately keeping black people from moving into that area after Katrina, just in terms of the different. Oh, go ahead.
I'm not trying to stir up sympathy. I'm just saying that in the context of the conversation about the levees.
Right.
The levees failed because the Army Corps of Engineers failed.
Right on. Were there any concerns? Because I think CNN, Anderson Cooper, you point this out in the film, that they had talked to Mr. Gettridge and some other news outlets. I think the Times-Picayune had done some stories on him.
A little bit of a folk hero there.
Right. Were there any concerns about profiteering off of misery or going in and broadcasting their misery for the world to, kind of prop their feet up and enjoy this?
I think everybody felt that, especially they still have these tour buses that go down there.
Wow.
Sort of like, I don't know, what city are you in?
Seattle, Washington.
Oh, you're in Seattle, Washington. Okay. So in Harlem, we have these tour buses of people that come through on Sundays and go to church. And there's actually some Sundays there's more tourists in the church than there are worshipers who belong to the church. So in the lower 9th Ward, what they had were these tour buses that were like Katrina tours, or the buses would drive through. And you'd be sitting on your front porch, and here comes a tour bus driving through with tourists looking at you like you some fish in an aquarium. So people got a little ticked off about that, because the people who are making money from the tour buses aren't the people that are living in the houses that need rebuilding. So there were a lot of failures, and there continue to be a lot of failures in New Orleans, from the school system to the housing. It's just, a lot of it's it's sort of come back. It's come back as a smaller city, but it's also a whiter city, a younger city. A lot of those folks that were the craftsmen of New Orleans have been displaced, and their families have been displaced. So it's a sad thing.
The Gettridge family, great illustration right there. When in the film, there's a segment where you're showing Ray Nagin, former Mayor Ray Nagin, where he's kind of talking about some of the aspects of the recovery, and Mr. Gettridge is kind of why I think he's finally got electricity back at his residence after a long delay, and he's kind of watching all this. And he's voicing his disgust with all of this. And you wrote a piece, Race, Class, and Katrina. You were talking about Ray Nagin. You wrote, as the months wore on, it seemed that responsibility for many of the city's problems could be pinned squarely on its chief executive, Mayor Ray Nagin. Nagin, a cable executive turned politician, had won re-election by shrewdly playing the race card after he saw support slipping among the business community. When I read that, I thought, wow, so what's your assessment? I guess you wrote this at the time of the piece, or closer to when the piece came out back in 2009. What's your assessment, reflecting, I guess it's been 6 years now?
Well, let me see. He's in prison now.
Yes, ma'am. Federal prison.
Yeah. So, that shows you that what goes around comes around. I mean, Nagin, there were people who told me that when the city fathers met in the days immediately after the flood, that Nagin had said, just clean out the entire Ninth Ward, just clean out all. They saw it as an opportunity to get rid of what they saw as what they called the criminal element, the young black men that were selling drugs. And Nagin was fine with that. Nagin was a businessman. He was representative of the business class. and I'm trying to remember now what he exactly said. It was on a radio interview. He really had a nervous breakdown. I'm like going way. I have no reporting to produce this to back this up. I don't have a doctor's note that said he had a nervous breakdown. But anybody who listened to Ray Nagin over the course of that week heard a man on the edge of a nervous breakdown. And different people responded down there in different ways. There was a mayor in, I want to say Biloxi, somewhere in Mississippi. The mayor just like freaked and left, and it turned out like the city treasurer or the comptroller or somebody stood up and became the mayor, and he's the guy that rebuilt the city. So there were a lot of things that happened. You never know how you're going to react to a disaster, and different people react to it in different ways. And then Nagin just wanted to get reelected, so he got himself reelected. But he didn't really, from where I sit, he wasn't representing.
Right. I have no dispute at all. It's just, at least it's been my observation, it's very common that people have that assessment of Ray Nagin, particularly with him being a federal prisoner. But there was a lot of this even before that happened. People widely saying that he's the worst mayor in the history of America, and he just did a terrible job.
I wouldn't go that far.
Many people do.
There's been a lot of bad mayors in America. I wouldn't call him the worst mayor in the history of America.
Many people say that. I've heard that said frequently and undisputed. And I have no problem saying, he should have never been mayor. He was not qualified. He never held public office. He was a business person. He worked at Cox Cable. No qualifications on his resume to support him being mayor at all. At least for me, the problem becomes, how did he get to be mayor in the first place? And have you read Gary Riblin's book, Katrina After the Flood?
I haven't read Gary's book now.
Okay.
But I know how he became mayor in the first place.
Okay. The white elites in New Orleans who bankrolled him and allowed him to become in my opinion, if white people, powerful, rich white people, are responsible for him being mayor in the first place, you bear a sizable chunk of culpability for anything that happens once he becomes mayor, because it would not have been possible without people like some of the same white people who came out and said, let's get rid of the black people. Jimmy Reese, who had
look, there's the mayor, the city government in New Orleans does not run the city. Let's just be straight about this. There is a shadow government that runs New Orleans. There's a shadow government that runs the entire state of Louisiana. It doesn't work the same way the rest of the United States works. So there's the city, the business elite, and even beyond the business elite, you have all those crews that come down during Mardi Gras. All those are the people that really run the city. Everybody else is just there, sort of like a figurehead. It's a very weird. It's a really interesting place. It's sort of like those puppets they have, those shadow puppets. Mm-hmm. Is it in Malaysia or Indonesia, Thailand, somewhere over there? It's sort of like that. The politicians are sort of doing this dance, and there's somebody else holding the strings. And the people who are pulling the strings, you will never be able to figure out. I mean, you could if you stayed there long enough and could trace all the money back, but you'll never be able to trace the money back.
Well, with Ray Nagin, some of these people...
It doesn't work the same way everywhere else does.
Right.
What you can be sure of is that there are white people running the strings, because white people run the United States.
Right. And I mean, with this case, there are names. Ashton Phelps, who at the time owned Times-Picayune, he was one of the people that bankrolled Ray Nagin, and the Times-Picayune endorsed him as the candidate for mayor when he ran and won in 2002. That's what I mean. It's, at least for me...
But there are other people who are behind Ashton Phelps.
Oh, I'm sure, but I mean, that's a big one right there. I mean, if
Ashton,
and Jimmy...
And the paper is now closed, too. So Nagin's in prison, and the Times-Picayune doesn't even exist anymore. So who's now running the city? I mean...
I'm sure it's still white people. For me, something seems incorrect if Ray Nagin...
I guess I'm always looking at which white people are we talking about.
Oh, for sure.
I'm a reporter, so I don't like to speak in generalizations.
Absolutely.
I want to know who exactly are we talking about, and what is their interest, and who are they tied to.
Absolutely.
So when I look at that, I'm not looking at, the guy that owned the newspaper that failed anyway. No, he's not a major player. He's not running the city. He's carrying water for somebody else.
That's fine. As I said, there are other names specifically with the Ray Nagin case that, are identified that folks could look at. And just, to me, something seems incorrect about Ray Nagin got what he deserved, because I hear that frequently. And all of the people, as you say, that are pulling the strings, some of these people, none of these people, they do not get...
who are the 35 people that were in that room with him the day after the levees broke? That's what you want to know.
I think some of those people are named as well, some of those white people.
I'm sure they're named. Probably Gary names them in the book. I spent a long time trying to get to a lot of them. And
okay.
I have a feeling Gary did get to most of them.
Okay. What tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You, when you were writing about this, even for the Dart Center for Journalism, you did some of your reflections on covering Katrina, and one of the passages you wrote, you said even residents in more affluent uptown area where floodwaters hit only 2 feet were devastated. I particularly remember the registered nurse whose husband had just received a kidney transplant the day the storm hit. She lost her job at the teaching hospital in the weeks following and now cared for both her chronically ill spouse and an elderly father with Alzheimer's disease in a city with unreliable electricity. She broke down in tears as she begged me to help. You talked just about some of your own trauma in covering all of this devastation and how it impacted you. Can you reflect?
Well, that was, I remember, because she was such a well-dressed white lady. She was not the person that I thought was going to break down in tears. But basically, the city, LSU closed its nursing program in the weeks. They closed several departments because they just had to sort of do a triage of what they could afford to keep open. And so she'd lost her job. Her husband was sick. Her husband had actually just come home from the hospital on the day the storm hit, and her father was already like 90 years old. So here she is. She has no source of income. Even though she had a house that wasn't that damaged, she was living just under a really high stress level. And even for months after Katrina, you would go down there and the electricity would just turn off, or you'd be somewhere and there's mold everywhere, so you're dealing with respiratory disease. Or if you have asthma, you just had to get the hell out of the city. I mean, it was just a really, I came to the conclusion that the only difference between the United States and a third world country is electricity. Because once you lose the electricity, especially when it's in the summer or when it's hot, forget about it. Nobody wants to be anywhere. But it was like, I'm taking in, those are 2 stories. I must have interviewed a dozen or 24 people by the time I got to Mr. Gettridge, and all of them had a variation of that story.
Wow.
And it was just a lot. You're listening to a lot of trauma, and it's in the United States. That's what was so hard. When I go to Palestine or Lebanon or Pakistan, I know that people there are living. I'm sort of braced to expect that I'm going to run into some stuff that I'm not really wanting to see, but it's part of my job as a reporter to hear those stories. I'm in the United States of America. This is Louisiana. I'm in New Orleans. If I drive an hour to Baton Rouge, I can get all the food I need and all the clean water I can drink. Somehow or another, the federal government couldn't figure out how to get any of those things to New Orleans for a very long time. And it was just like, what's going on? Mm. It was, and I went back. I made about 24 trips over the course of 2 years as I did the film.
Wow.
So there was just a lot, and I was very sort of embedded with Mr. Gettridge's family, and so there were young people who'd come back and were helping friends clean out homes and discovered bodies that had been rotting in there for a long time. There were people who were dealing with the stress of trying to get insurance money, people whose homes actually survived the flood, but they had some kind of water damage to the roof, and so when the next time it rained, the house got flooded again a second time, and then they got black mold, and they lost the house anyway after having lived through the first traumatic event. So, you're like dealing with all this stuff, and you don't see any sign of relief coming from anywhere. And in fact, nobody else even seems to care. I would come back to New York, and it was like New Orleans wasn't even on the front page of the paper anymore. I mean, the New York Times, to its credit, tried to do a really good job. God, I can't remember the name of that reporter. It's in L.A. now. But they tried to keep it current, but it was like you would come back here, and it was like, people were talking about, Broadway or something. I mean, it's just totally irrelevant. And that sense that you're that you're somewhere where people are living a totally irrelevant life is itself a sign of PTSD. And I'm not a person who would have ever admitted that was what I had going on, really, for a long time. Really, until I read that piece.
Wow.
Which was just last August. So.
Wow. Fascinating. Did you get a sense, like you had a moment where you were speaking with Mr. Gettridge, kind of after he'd already got his house repaired? I think his wife might have even been back. Lydia might have been back with him at that point, and you asked him if he had to do it over again, would you do it? And he said, "Oof, I don't know." Did you get a sense of why he hesitated?
Yeah. Because he knew what he had gone through. He thought all the neighbors were going to come back. He thought the neighborhood was going to be the way it was. Instead, he was this little lone house out there. It was like little house on the prairie, except this prairie was the lower Ninth Ward. There was nobody out there. I mean, finally Brad Pitt came along and built some houses on those, what do you call them, houses? Solar efficient houses. But, Mr. Gettridge's, none of Mr. Gettridge's friends came back. So the neighborhood that he was that he thought, I'll rebuild the house and then they'll come back. Nobody came back. And then his wife came back, but she was sick, so she wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. You couldn't make it the same. What had been washed away couldn't come back.
Man, it is nothing really pleasant in any of the Katrina stories for the most part, but it is, I mean, in my opinion, just seeing this 85-year-old black male out working to put his house back together.
By the way, he just passed about a year ago.
Right, I think he was 94. Just 90, seeing.
Let me see. No, he and my stepdad are the same age. So he's 92. He was 92.
92.
91. Yeah.
Wow.
92, because his birthday would have been in August 31st.
Okay. Wow.
He would have been 93 on August 31st.
It's just, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And as you said, he didn't even have that much formal education, dropping out of school at a young age. It's just, it's pretty incredible.
He had desegregated the union. He was the first black Masonist in that union.
Wow.
And, opened the way for others to come in. He was a black Indian, but he said he had to stop costuming on Mardi Gras because he had to support the 9 kids that he didn't have the time. He basically he worked as a longshoreman. He was a Masonist. He was somewhat of I would call him they call it folk art. What do they call it? Outside art. He built this house for this dentist who was sort of a patron of his. There was an amazing, actually he's not a dentist, he's a regular doctor, internist. It's just an amazing piece of work that he just designed the entire house and built it from the ground up. I mean, he's just an amazing man. A treasure.
Absolutely. That's why I said it's profound. I would encourage anyone. It's definitely worth sitting down. And both of the films that we've talked about, she has a whole sterling body of work, but definitely the 2 films that we've spent our time talking about this evening, they are definitely worth a view. And you can even get your children, I think, with both of these. If, folks are always looking for films you can show your children. I think... I don't know, Secret Daughter, that might be a bit heavy, but I think the Gettridge story is definitely one you can show that to everybody. It's pretty inspiring. I'll check real quick to see if any of the folks that dialed in, if you all have a quick question for Ms. Cross before she departs. Thomas in New York, did you have a question, or are you just listening? See, Thomas in New York, I don't know if he's just listening. Or our retired firefighter, did you have a question, or are you just listening? Or
hey, can I be heard?
Oh, yes, sir. We can hear you, Thomas in New York.
Hey, good evening, Gus. Good evening to you, Mrs. Cross.
Hey.
I loved your definition of racism. It was very good, and I commend you for the work you did on Hurricane Katrina.
Thank you.
I also like the statement you made about your mother. You said that she was addicted to being white. I thought that was great. I interpret that to mean she's addicted to being a racist.
Okay.
Would you agree that the institutions, the systems that you're talking about are kept intact by the collective body of white people?
They're kept in track by the white people that run them. I wouldn't say that every white person is part of
Well,
that.
what about the white people that ignore the fact that they're in place?
And what about the white people that sit back and don't do anything about it either? I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, every white person isn't in a position of power, but there are white people that are in positions of power, and it's on them to do it. And there's actually now some black people in positions of power, too, so we need to start holding everybody a little bit accountable, you know?
I agree. Do you think that they're good white people?
Are there good white people? I think all people are good.
Okay. Do you think that you said that you before you got into your story, you wanted to speak to white people who were going to talk to you honestly? Do you think that white people...
That's how I ended up talking to my mom, because she was the only one that I knew that would.
Oh, okay. Well, that is my question.
That was the bottom line.
Because I think your mother was very honest.
My mother did a pretty good job, too, actually, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think your mother was very honest with what she said about Nicole Simpson. Who do you think is more dangerous when it comes to practicing racism, white men or white women?
Oh, boy. White women honestly don't know what they're doing. They're sort of unconscious about it, and that makes it, and because of the power that they're now wielding, that concerns me, that they don't see their own unconscious bias. Who is more dangerous? I don't know. Who is more? It's all dangerous. All of it is dangerous.
Okay. I have just a couple more questions. Hopefully I could get them in. Would you agree that black women have a different texture of hair than half white women that are black?
No.
No, okay.
I mean, not all. It depends. You know, genes are a funny thing. Genes can come out all kinds of different ways.
All right.
Your hair texture is determined by how that gene pool is playing, and to pretend that somebody who is dark brown skin must have two sort of genetically pure African parents, I think, especially knowing the history of this country, is just living in fairyland. I mean, not a one of us that's living inside this country can claim that we pure anything. We're all mutts. That's sort of where I come down on this. We're all mutts, And if you look at Latin America, if you look at the range, Brazilians have 32 names for the range from dark brown skin to light skin. We're not quite there, but so I don't see any. I refuse to go there because none of us knows where we really came from.
I think we might have lost Thomas in New York. If he dials back in, we'll see, because I think he said he had two final questions. That was one. If he gets his other. While we wait, retired firefighter in Florida, or any of the other listeners, did you all have a question you wanted to get in for June Cross, retired firefighter in Florida? Did you have a question?
Yes, sir. Greetings, ma'am. Hello. I see on the Facebook page you have a documentary.
Wilhelmina's War?
Ma'am?
Wilhelmina's War? Are you talking about Wilhelmina's War?
I was talking about on Gus's Facebook. I believe it's Gus' Facebook.
Page. Sorry.
Yes. It's about, almost 2 hours long?
Oh, that's Secret Daughter. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there anything in particular or any themes in particular that you would want the viewer to get out of your documentary, or so? Could you?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. No, there isn't. I don't. I'm a reporter. Okay, let me be clear about this. I am a professor, but I am first and foremost a reporter. It's not my job to make you think or want to make you think anything. What I do is show the reality of the world as my camera presents it and try to be fair about it to the best of my ability. And it's your job to decide what it is you want to draw from that. It's not my job to try to make you think anything.
Yes, I'm aware of that, but I would have known if I hadn't asked you. Because some people do.
I'm just saying, I don't know. I can't.
I understand.
Everybody brings their own background and their own thought process to what they want.
Right. Some people want you to get something out of it. I would have known unless I asked you.
Yeah, the last line of the film is, we need to keep the conversation going. So we need to keep the conversation going. And all of our voices are important to that conversation, so all of us need to pipe up.
Conversation, what particular subject?
Conversation about race and racism and structural racism.
Oh, okay, cool.
All of that.
Cool.
Everybody's voice needs to be, it's important that all of our voices are heard, and it's important that all of our voices speak.
Cool. I'm getting... Great. I'm getting more anxious to see it right after the program.
All righty.
Thank you, ma'am.
Have a good evening.
Right on.
You too, ma'am.
Our caller in Michigan, did you have a question for Ms. Cross?
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello? Hi.
Good evening. Hi. Good evening, Gus, and to your guest. Just a quick question. Who do you feel is more confused about racism, white people or non-white people?
Ooh. I think more white people don't even know how to think about racism. So I would say probably most white people are more confused about racism. But then when you come over to the black community, we've internalized so much self-hatred that and we don't even see where it's coming from anymore. So that's why we need to keep that conversation going, so that even though the conversation feels like we're yelling at each other sometimes, sooner or later somebody will get hurt. That's a great question.
Okay, well, thanks for taking for answering it.
I'm sorry I don't have a clearer answer for you.
No, that's no worries. Thank you. Thanks for taking my call, guys.
Okay.
Let's see. I think, appreciate that. I think Thomas in New York might be back with us. Did you want to get your other question in, Thomas in New York?
Oh, yes, I did. I'm sorry, my phone dropped.
No problem.
Last question for you, Ms. Course, is you said that your mother took off her whiteness when she lived with your father in the black neighborhood, and I was kind of confused by that.
She surrendered it. I don't know that she took it off. She never really took it off, but as far as white people in the United States were concerned, a white woman who went to live with a black man in the 40s and 50s surrendered the white privilege during the period in which she was living with him. I don't think she ever took it off. I know she never took it off, because if she had, she wouldn't. I could just, you hear what I'm saying? You hear the difference?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Yeah. Well, that was my last question, so thank you for coming back to me, Gus.
Okay. Thank you.
We aim to please. We aim to please. Great. I think we nabbed all of the callers. I am excited to see the new documentary. You said it should be coming out on PBS sometime. Is that like later this year or next year? Or
no, it'll be I'm sorry. My cats are angry at me because they have not been fed. It will be coming out in 2016, and I don't have an actual. It's sometime between February and April. How's that? Is that? But okay. I'll be sure I let you know. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I'll share with other listeners. I'm sure folks will definitely want to check it out.
Okay. Yeah, it's a heavy one. It's a character. Wilhelmina is a woman very much like Mr. Gettridge, different in South Carolina, not Louisiana, and a different kind of strength that she has. But yeah.
Okay, we will definitely be on the lookout. I guess my last question: the piece that you wrote when the Old Man in the Storm was originally released, you wrote that to let the working and middle classes atrophy as contractors and the well-off move to protect their holdings seems not only cruel but un-American. And you were talking about how a lot of black people in particular, poor people in general, were kind of left to the wayside in the recovery in New Orleans. And I was thinking that this is pretty typical when these type of events happen in this area of the world. I know Nathan Connolly, in his book, A World More Concrete, he talks about there was a hurricane in Miami in the 1920s, and white people ran around at gunpoint and rounded up black people and made them clean the debris and clean up the white areas of town. And if they refused, they could be beaten, jailed, killed, all of the above. We also had in Jonathan Berry's book, The Rising Tide, he documents in 1927 in Mississippi, they had a tremendous flood. They would not allow black Mississippians to evacuate because they were afraid if they let them leave, they wouldn't come back, and they needed their cheap black labor. So they put them in concentration camps and demanded that they, clean up the debris and get everything straight. And if they refused to work, they wouldn't eat, so they would just starve them to death. And I mean, it's certainly... Well, I mean, you could argue which was worse, but I mean, there's a pattern. This seems to be particularly American in how we respond to disasters, particularly if the victims are black. Does that make sense? Is that logical?
It does. There's another one, Naomi Klein. Have you Naomi?
Shock
I'm looking
Doctrine.
up her book on it. Shock Doctrine. Yes, the Shock Doctrine. Yes, which is the same idea. The shock doctrine is in essence a way for the moneyed classes to clear out the poor classes and make the world safe for capitalism. I mean, it's basically the thesis of that book in a nutshell. But worth reading. I was really mad that she wrote that book before the book got published before I finished my film.
Wow. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Man, I hope folks that are listening will be on the lookout for the new project. Might be renamed a third time, but we will definitely
I hope not. I'm sort of going to the mat with them on that. But anyway, we'll see. Yeah.
We will support, and then also check out the content that you've already done, the films we talked about today, The Old Man in the Storm, as well as The Secret Daughter. Outstanding work, I think both of them reveal a lot about racism, white supremacy. Again, just really, really glad we could have you on the program this evening.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure, Gus.
For sure. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take excellent care and keep up the tremendous work.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. Good evening.
Ready. Good evening. Bye-bye.
Context of White Supremacy. Excellent work. I looked, not today, I was emailing a white woman about being a guest on the program. She did a documentary film, I think it came out this year, on President Obama's white mother. And I was trying to get her on the program, and she wanted a list of other programs that we've done on documentaries. And I started going back through the years, and I was like, wow, I was impressed when I looked at the list of filmmakers that we've had on. Like, I looked briefly just to make sure. It was, I think, Rihad Desai. He was on the program from South Africa towards the end of 2014. We talked about his documentary films. He did one on the mining massacre, the Marikana mining incident. That was 2012. And he also did a film on a uprising against white supremacy in South Africa that happened in 1906, Bambata. I think it's the Revolt of 1906. That's the name of it. We did the film Off and Running about the black female. She was adopted by two white lesbians. And they made a film about all this. We had Keith Beauchamp on the program. He did a documentary film on Emmett Till, the untold story of Emmett Till. the Spanish Lake, the documentary about how the area around St. Louis, how they strategically, deliberately dislocated the black residents and moved them to various areas around the neighborhood, and then went and terrorized the residents once they got in certain places. I mean, it's pretty lengthy list. I think you could collect all of the different filmmakers that we've had on the program and the different documentaries that they've done, and I think you could learn a lot. Lacey Schwartz, Little White Lie. You could learn a lot. I should have asked her about that if she had seen Little White Lie and if she saw any parallels with her mom. I can't believe I... Oh, well. Anyway, Lacey Schwartz, Little White Lie. Long list. I was thinking even I should put a blog post up with all of the different documentary filmmakers that we've had on and the projects that they've done that we talked about on the program. It is considerable. Anywho, if folks have anything they want to share, anything stood out, we can make time for that. I did want to say just the Ray Nagin thing, like I said, and for me it stands out more so because I've been reading a lot of other material, the Gary Rivlin book, obviously, that we're doing, and other content as well, and that is standard. Just people go to town on Ray Nagin. He is the worst. He's a chump. He's no good. His fingernails are dirty. His shirt was wrinkled. He's the worst mayor in the history of, the history of the word mayor. I mean, like, they go in on Ray Nagin. White people, black people, everybody, they go in on Ray Nagin. Like I said, it's difficult for me to be sympathetic to Ray Nagin because I don't like it when people, blatantly are saying things that are not true. Anybody saying things that are not true, and there's no reason to believe that this person made this statement in error, or there's no reason to give benefit of the doubt. Like, this is just, you're deliberately saying things that are not true. That is not acceptable anybody under the system of white supremacy, or any time really. But even with that, Ray Nagin, not qualified to be mayor, should have never been mayor, did a horrible job handling things. Fine. Under the system of white supremacy, and that's what everything would come down to. If there is a system of white supremacy, if white folk are indeed in charge, how in the world can Ray Nagin or any non-white person be most to blame for anything that happens? That's just not, to me, it's not logical. It's the same thing. I am going to use a metaphor, but it's the same thing if let's say Thomas in New York, we'll use him because he's with us. I don't want him to come out well with the cooking. So I say, okay, I'm going to sabotage this. I will buy the groceries, I will provide the recipe, and I will even stand over him and instruct him how I want the meal prepared. Do this, do that. I've already given the recipe, but I'm just making sure. I'm going to supervise, boom, 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 then we go sit down. The meal is terrible, and I blame Thomas in New York for it. It's all your fault, blah, blah, blah. I don't have any culpability in this. Like, you bought, none of this would be possible without you. None of this. How is it that this is all Thomas's fault? White people do the exact same thing all the time. They get a black person, put them up front. Everyone will get mad at the black person. And it's not that the black person did the correct thing. It may be that they did something incorrect, but white people had a hand. They were culpable. In my view, they are most to blame for whatever incorrect things that non-white person did. It's just, it is amazing to me how frequently successful white people are at employing that strategy, what Mr. Fuller calls racial showcasing. And I guess that's why they continue to do it, because it is extremely successful. Certainly everybody can take their own opinion, but I mean, I'm just following logic. This is not the, hooray for Ray Nagin campaign here at all. I'm just saying, he would have never been mayor if it was not for white people that can be named and have been named on this program before. It will be named again tomorrow in the book as we're going over it. But when there are direct white people that are responsible, when this is clear and documented, he would have never been in this position if it was not for white people. How are they not most to blame for anything that happens once he gets this office? That's just, maybe I'm talking crazy. Anywho, fascinating. I'm so glad we were patient and hung out and got her on the line. It would have been a shame to miss out. And I'm so glad I watched Secret Daughter. We certainly could have spent, more time talking about the Gettridge family phenomenal film as well. But wow, the information about her situation with her white mom and her dad and everything. Wow, I can only say again, woo. Incredible. I can't believe I didn't ask her about Lacey Schwartz, though, if she had seen that film. I'm sure she had. If folks had any comments they wanted to get in, the folks that dialed in with a hand up should be with us. Firefighter, caller in Michigan, and Thomas in New York. If y'all had any feedback, any comments you would like to share. I think every non-white guest that we've had on the program who has been asked about who is more confused about racism, they all think that white people are more confused about racism. That right there further evidences the enormity of the problem, in my opinion, if my memory is accurate. Did you all have anything you wanted to share?
Have you heard?
Yes, sir.
Hey, good evening, Gus. Good evening to the rest of the callers. I found that she was very defensive of her white mother. I feel like that's a pattern that, I think it's common nature, human nature. You're always going to love your mother, and, that's a big problem with interracial. I find that people who have a black mother and a white father take a totally different perspective on, just things in general. She wasn't, I had some comments, unfortunately, we are not as suspicious of white people as we are of our own people. It's sad, I chop it down to that addiction to white validation. Based off of what you was talking about before she came on, I had a little theory. I used to say that, it's either two things that white people are hiding, which is why they don't want to live around black people. I was thinking, either they're engaging in some rituals or something at night and they don't want us to know, or they want to hide the fact that 80 to 100% of their time they are fixated and focused on dominating black people. I think that's the one right there. They don't want us to know that. So they move us around, like you were saying earlier, and they'll move in, but in a few years, they don't want us here. They'll get rid of us, and, they don't want us to know they're conjuring up more schemes to dominate us. And money's definitely not their objective. Power is. As for the other guest that came on who had similar type of stories, because, her thing with Katrina was good, but the other one, with the white mother, that to me was like, wow. I would hate my mom to say that to me. I mean, I don't know. But when we were talking earlier, what was the name of the guy who came on and he was also lied to and said that he had some skin disease and he didn't know he was black until he had a girlfriend tell him. You mentioned him earlier, Gus.
Dave Myers?
Dave Myers, yes. When you talked about it, I remembered that guy. And I have a lot more respect and empathy for him than Lacey Schwartz. It's like, he was really, I think, confused. And she wasn't, I think that she knew she was black and she was just part trying to be white. You know what I'm saying? But as you said earlier, when two people mix, it's the kid, I mean, to me, the doctor who was on this course, who was on Professor, I think, she was very unconfused, but she was practicing confusion, in my opinion. She didn't want, like, even with the Ray Nagin thing, I mean, you hit her with some logic, and she did not want to give up on that. And to me, she was also doing the same thing with anything they say about her mother. She was very, adamant, or, she loves her mother, and you wasn't going to say nothing bad about her. So she'll also protect white people. I knew my mom.
The caller at 5972 should be with us as well. If we have any black female, I guess anybody can comment, but particularly if we have any black females who heard the segment where we talked about her metaphor, where she said black women have an interesting relationship with their hair, kind of like the one I have with my white mother. If there are any black females who heard that segment and, could share their thoughts about that and what you heard, I would really appreciate it.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, very interesting. Guess I enjoyed the call of this evening, and I did hear that part. I actually chimed in right when she was speaking on that. I thought it was interesting when she I don't think she actually answered your question or really explained the metaphor. In my opinion, I wasn't really clear on her explanation, but I also thought it was interesting when she said something to the effect like black women don't know or haven't seen their natural hair, something like that. And I thought that was strange. But her, just her answers were interesting. I thought it was, definitely evident that the tragic arrangements definitely just lead to so much confusion. And the more and more I ask people the question, who's more confused, I think from my tally, Gus, for the most part, people will say white people are more confused. I don't think anyone that I've asked said black people are more confused. They'll either not answer the question or, kind of dilly-dally around, but I don't recall anyone saying, since I've asked, that black people are more confused. But very interesting. So I'm glad I was able to listen in this evening.
Right on. That just, again, the enormity of the problem when I think I've said before that, I'm saying without a doubt, like one of the few things in life I can be very confident about, like 1 + 1 is 2. Black people are way more confused about racism than white people. Like, no question about it. You can bank on it. You can bank on it. And that's what I mean. I'm saying something that I recognize, like, okay, either a whole lot of people who talk about racism and have like degrees and big titles and everything are very wrong on this one critical point. Either they are all wrong and you have a handful of people who are saying, yeah, I think, non-white people are more confused, or I'm talking crazy, and everybody else who believes that, non-white people are more confused are all talking crazy and, should be discarded, and you should maybe throw out everything else that I'm saying. But that is the enormity of the problem, where you have that much, however you want to classify that, confusion, incorrect thinking, poor logic, lying, whatever. However you chalk it up, enormous problem if my view is correct.
Well, I just want to comment really quick, too. I agree because, when you really think about the bigger picture, black people or non-white people are the victims. And so when it's just becoming crystal clear to me, like, if you're a victim, and you're constantly being subjected to this mistreatment, then you have to be confused. And so it's really interesting to hear the answer. So it's just becoming more and more obvious, and it's evident, to me at least. And, either I'm kind of off with you, or, most of us who agree with you is either us or, I don't know. So thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir. Oh.
I'm sorry. You can go ahead.
If you haven't commented, go ahead, because I've commented before.
Okay, thank you. I haven't commented. Excuse me. Yes, I was just thinking that what she meant by black women having the same kind of relationship with their hair as they do with white people. I think she's trying to say that we're confused. We don't know what to do with our hair. And we're confused around white people. We don't know how to behave around them. And I think that she said, I think the reason she said that white people are more confused about racism than black people, because she feels that the white people don't have to think about it. whereas we think about it all the time. But of course, she was wrong. But I think that was her analysis of that. And also, I was wanted to bring up a point. There was a PBS special about 15 years ago called An American Love Story. I don't know if anybody heard of it, but it was like a 2-week PBS. Well, it was 2 weeks, and I kind of liked it. I ended up buying I forgot the DVD. They didn't have DVD players, but the VHS tapes. And it was about a white woman. She was kind of professional. She married a black man, and he was a local musician. He was kind of popular in the area they lived with, and they had 2 daughters. And one of the daughters didn't seem to like black people that much. She was more close to her mother, and the other daughter was closer to her father. And the mother, when they would talk to the mother, she seemed like, she didn't care about the race of her kids, or it didn't matter her, she said, because I remember at one point she said, I can't tell them how to be black. I don't know nothing about it. That means nothing to me. I just thought that was really cold, but apparently they had grew up in North Carolina in the 1960s. There was a lot of racism and stuff, and then the wife, she got a PhD in something or whatever, and they moved to New York City, and they were living in a high-rise apartment building. But I just thought that it was a really interesting documentary. And when I was listening to that lady talk tonight, a lot of the stuff she said, it reminded me of that, about that documentary. It's called An American Love Story. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, with the question of who's more confused, I think on non-white black people's part especially, I don't think we think deeply on the question that's being asked. The guest tonight very quickly stated that black people cannot practice racism. I believe she very quickly directly said it when she stated that because we don't have any power. And so that should give any non-white person a huge clue on who's more confused on the system of racism, when you also understand the fact that white people are the tiny, it's not even close, tiny minority of people on the planet. If you understand that there is such thing as racism, white supremacy, and you do some thinking on the question, you would have to it's just like I think I heard Gus say 1 and 1 is 2, where you have to understand that it must be because there's a large percentage of white people who have a keen understanding of racism, what they're doing, and how they go about their work, as far as they're concerned. Back to tragic relationships, even from the standpoint of the non-white person who engages sexually with a white person, one of the issues that takes place from doing that is that person is affected psychologically. So now if you put that to the results of a quote-unquote offspring, it's going to, I just got to figure it's going to be more in debt as far as the potentiality of confusion or, from the standpoint of kind of like not speaking fully on the subject. When part of your DNA that's not too far from you, or you have a knowledge of that person is a white person. So that just confirms for me to anybody any non-white person who wants to know to stay away from white people when it comes to sex, because you don't want to get that started at all, as far as they're concerned, because there's just too much negative results that comes out of that. And that's all I have to say.
6492 should be with us. The caller at 5972. You were just saying, I think we had you on the line. I don't know if you got disconnected or what have you, but if you had a hand up, wanted to chime in, don't wait till the last second. Go ahead and get your hand up if you had something you wanted to share. 6492 should be with us, and the other folks as well.
Hi, this is Joy. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, no? Hello, okay. I was thinking about what she was saying about hair. When she was saying it, it sounded like nonsense. Comparing, the way she set up her analogy. I don't think that we're, as far as I know, we've never been that confused about hair. It seems to be more a big deal as things go on. But, especially when, like the braiding came out and now we have natural hair. It's just, I think that we are a very creative people. Even if you look at the, like the ancient Egyptians, they had various hairstyles. And so I don't know that, what she was saying was accurate. And she also said something about, what did she say? Actually, I probably should have dialed in, but it was a bit late. But I'm just curious, like today, there are many black children, 2 black parents that are lighter as light as children with 1 white parent. So I'm just wondering if we'll be able to even tell the difference. We make a difference, right? Because we can call one biracial. But is there a real difference? And is this just us being, more and more separate? Like with this thing with the, male and female, they got to be totally separate. We can't. I think that the system is bombarding us with so many different tactics right now out of fear, because we're showing signs of being slightly awoke and slightly less confused. But and so they want to keep us that way, and that goes back to the way she answered. Like white people are more confused. I don't think white people are confused at all. They are better at communicating that they're pretending to be confused. Because if they, like you say all the time, Gus, they would not make the choices they make. They know when a black person is around how to, even though they're Republicans and Democrats, right? But they'll stick together in a heartbeat to defeat the black person. So I think those are my comments. And about that book, I guess, the shock doctrine. I've never heard you mention it before, so I was just curious as to what you thought about it.
I mean, it's not capitalism. I said that at the beginning when I was talking about Mr. Fuller. It's racism, white supremacy. In my view, when you present it as it's capitalism and capitalists just look to take advantage when you have these disasters and it doesn't matter who it is, that's just not accurate. That's certainly not accurate with Hurricane Katrina because, yes, St. Bernard's Parish and Lakeview and other white areas, some of the white areas in Mississippi and even Alabama, yes, they did have a lot of damage, though not as bad as New Orleans, but they have recovered much better than black people in New Orleans. Even black people in New Orleans that have money have not recovered as well as white people. That's, in my opinion, that's what I mean. So, I mean, she has some accurate point. Naomi Klein, she has some accurate points, some accurate information, but typical white fashion, she's not being as accurate as she could be with as much information as she knows. As a refined and informed white woman, as Naomi Klein is, I think she could have given up a lot more accurate information. And I suspect she's practicing racism deliberately.
Yeah, to keep the cover going. So, okay, you're worried about capitalism when? And at any point in time, it's almost like, to me, it's one of their playbooks. They can implement this at anywhere at any time. Like you were talking about earlier, where, they move us around. All of a sudden, we got to move. We move here, move there. And it's not like, a lot of these things they plan out 30 years in advance. They just, I don't know if you saw that. I think it's in Alabama. They got these new voting laws in. And, oh, by the way, we closed down all the places where you can register to vote. I think there's 3 left in the state.
That's not confusion. That's not accident in my
no,
opinion.
That's
not confusion.
That's a plan.
Exactly. That's meticulous planning that they have thought of. And even what I would encourage with in the context of even Katrina, a lot of the things that happened, they were just accelerated. Like when people talk about the attack on public housing, that started before Katrina. They were already tearing down. So they just were able to drastically speed things up with Katrina, with even the school system in New Orleans. They already had the New Orleans Recovery School District. They had that before Katrina. They just expanded it drastically after the storm. It was a lot of this stuff they were already doing. It just presented an opportunity for them to, hey, we can really go to work right now. Like we'll be, 20 years ahead of what we wanted to do. That's, in my view, that's the way to look at a lot of this, but more on that to come. Other folks have commentary they want to make sure they got in. Everybody who dialed in with a hand up, feel free. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I asked her if she felt that half white people had the same texture here as black people. Most people I meet that are mixed, their texture is somewhat different, and I haven't seen an exception yet. I mean, I just because. I took it to be a little offensive with the statement she made. I mean, that's just how I took it. It was sort of like you don't have the same problems with hair, the same issues with hair as a black woman who doesn't have a white parent. You get what I'm saying? Yeah.
I understand what you just said is logical. I will say just what I saw in the film, and I am not a black female. At any rate, from the film, there were several moments where there was the bathroom scene that she talked about, which was a pivotal moment. She said she was like 4 or 5 when she didn't want to get her hair wet or had anxiety about that, her hair getting straight and then getting in the pool and it all gets ruined. Hair came up a few times in the film. Issues around hair, what to do with it, am I going to get it wet? Me being the only one who's not getting in the pool, like that came up enough. And just from reading some of the stuff and conversations we've had with Pam and some of the other folks who've been guests on the program, it sounded familiar to what I've heard from other black females who have 2 black parents and 4 black grandparents. But I could be in error. But the metaphor, if anything, that is yet another illustration of why I say when people start using metaphors when we're talking about racism, man, like it should slow down and let me, write down what you're saying and then maybe even ask you to explain it, because it's just been my experience that the metaphors can, wow, they can really get, they can get out there in terms of what's being compared. And that with that metaphor, a lot of that, in my opinion, comes down to how you feel about black hair as a black person, how you feel about white women, and in this case, how you feel about your white mom. Fascinating metaphor. Just another example of why I would encourage folks to pay attention anytime folks start using those comparisons. Be alert, ask questions. Any other comments? Anything else stand out from what you heard? I'm so glad I saw Secret Daughter. Can't imagine doing the program and not talking about that film.
Have you heard?
Yes, ma'am.
About the hair, there's a lot of white people with very curly hair. And when I was in high school, they were into this thing where they take a ironing board to straighten their hair. Put their hair out on the ironing board and iron it. And so, I think yes, we've been conditioned to think that our hair is a bigger problem than it really is, but it's actually one thing that they think that they can kind of pretend to hold over us. And regarding that book again, there's a quote by Winston Churchill: "Never let a good crisis go to waste." So they've been up to this stuff for a very long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that one's very popular among the quote-unquote younger white people that might, say that they're activists or what they call progressive. They're working against racism. That book, Shock Doctrine, very, very popular. Very, very popular. Anybody else? Anything else they want to make sure they get in before we conclude? I did get my correction in last week. I guessed incorrectly that Viola Davis's clients on How to Get Away with Murder would be white because they killed their parents. And in season 1, all of her clients are white with the exception of one. They were indeed non-white clients. However, that was drastically overshadowed by the reveal that she's in a lesbian relationship with a white woman now. So I was incorrect, but it just kind of made the point that wasn't even the storyline for the movie. It just further compounded everything that I had already said about the film, and again showing white people's meticulous planning. They give Viola Davis first black female to win an Academy Award on Sunday. By Thursday, her character has got to tongue kiss a white woman on television. That is the system of white supremacy at work again. Although that's another one that I suspect most people would not see that as racism, white supremacy, which again, unless I'm in error, just shows the enormity of the problem. Anything else? Are folks satisfied?
Oh, Regina King won Emmy also, didn't she? They don't even talk about her. She just won it and vanished. I don't know. I wasn't following it that closely.
She won.
I think I turned it off after she won. Yeah.
She won playing a black Muslim working against racism and trying to help her black brother. I wrote about that on Facebook. I too noticed that it seemed like she didn't really get a lot of attention, but that was kind of I thought that was a lot more surprising than Viola Davis, a black Muslim fighting against. She has a rally against racism and everything like that. That's what her character is doing, fighting against racism, going to church, devout Muslim, and trying to help her black brother, who is unfortunately, anyway. But I was very surprised that she won for that role. I'm not a fan of the show. The show is American Crime. I'm not a fan, but it still was kind of an eye raise for me that she actually won for that role.
Well, I've kind of given up TV. I don't watch any of those shows anymore. And it's almost like black females and sex is getting worse and worse and worse. Because I watched that one, I can't think of it. It was on BET, and, single woman, professional woman. It's she sleeps with everybody. They've shown some really kind of low-down things on that show, and it's okay, that's it. She was trying to get pregnant, all kinds of stuff, and I don't know why we can't have any kind of dignity, self-esteem, nothing on these shows. And the problem that I have with it is that I walk around the real world, and these crazy white people think it's real. No, you can't talk to me that way. No, you're not going to put your hands on me. That's it. I'm here for business, and that's it. No, I'm not. What's her name? Scandal either. That's the worst one to me. Very well educated, owns her own business. Runs circles around everybody, trying to, protect these people, whatever she does. But the only thing she can be is the president's jump off. She can't do anything better than that. Okay. And now we got Viola going both ways now. Now that's going to be the cool thing. I can't turn on Twitter on Thursday nights because that's all they talk about, all this stuff.
Yep. Well thought out plan. Very well thought out plan. Oh, did I? Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Thomas in New York.
I see it's for the last few years. I know Gus, you don't watch television, and we don't talk about television, but I'm just going to make this quick statement about television, is that the gay theme in black shows is very, very, very high. I can't think of one black show where it's not there. From reality shows to, now sitcoms. Another thing that the guest said that stuck out to me was white privilege, and her mother was practicing white privilege, and I kind of thought to add it, know that your mother was practicing racism, you don't leave your kids, that's the most racist act I could think of a person doing, especially a woman, that was it, Gus. Thanks.
And to tell the child, if you were white, you could stay here. Maybe, 'cause she gave away the white child too. But at least you would have a chance. Like, you would be in a better position. But since you're not, we will get your suitcase packed and we will catch you next summer. That is, and again, that is the point that I make consistently. All of these, and I mean, you can see I'm not speaking on the basis of one person. We've had a lot of these cases now of these non-white people who have a white parent, and all of these almost unbelievable lies and treachery and all of this. This is your child. This is not some stranger. This is your child. This individual came out of your womb. And you're still practicing racism. I mean, that to me, that says everything. That this is not an anomaly. That there are tons of examples of this being carried out over and over and over and over generations. White people with the same behavior where they don't even hook up their non-white offspring. All right, I'm gonna mistreat all the other niggas, but this is my little one dark child, so I'll at least make sure that they don't even do that. Like, I mean, what to say? There was a shooting today in Oregon. I wanted to make sure I got that in as well. The shooting today down in Oregon. They said some of our listeners reported that the suspected shooter, who they allege died in a shootout with enforcement officers, according to what I saw a few hours before we came on the air. But they said in one of the reports the alleged shooter is a non-white person, might be a non-white person with a white parent and a non-white parent. I'm checking to get more details and what have you. This is a real recent event, so still checking details and what have you. But that did happen today down in Oregon with the shooting. That's definitely something we'll talk about on Saturday. Was somebody else going to get their comment in?
If it's a non-white person, then this is definitely has something to do with someone practicing racism against them. I would imagine that was just a manifesto or something left behind. It would have something to do. And they still haven't released that reporter's manifesto, have they?
I haven't seen it. Fester Flanagan?
I'm sure they probably pissed off they even said something about it. I mean, it's like, what happened to that? And no one's even talking about it. It's like, I swear it's out the news because whatever's in that manifesto, it was, woo. They don't never want us to, it was really an indictment. Yeah.
I heard video, they seem to say it was a white guy. He was into some, website, 4chan or something like that, posting all kinds of crazy stuff. And, the way they described it was a racist website. So I don't know. On the John and Ken show when I was driving home today.
On the shooting today, the only thing that I've heard that could be kind of placed as a reason, I heard something about religion. That they said some of the witness heard the shooter attempting to identify people by using as a dividing line religion. That was a very brief statement, so I don't know exactly on how that fits into the context of the mass shooting. But that's the only thing that I heard as far as what could possibly be considered a reason was the word religion.
They mentioned that too. They said that they had them stand up one at a time and ask them what their religion was, and then.
Oh, yes, that's exactly what.
They didn't say what religion kept you alive. They just said they would shoot them. So,
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
If that's the case, then I could assume that the dividing line was Christianity/Islam.
Oh, that's interesting. That's definitely important to see how that shakes out. If it's a white person, if it's a non-white person, the religious thing, if they try and say that this was a non-white person who was some ISIS affiliate or extreme Muslim extremist, to see how they're able to use that, because they had that attack in Sweden at the IKEA this week, where it was two black males. They said that they were immigrants, that they got knives or whatever and attacked some people in the IKEA store in Sweden this week, and that riled up all sorts of what they call a backlash against non-white immigrants coming into that part of the world. It was a big story. It was in the New York Times and papers in the States as well. But I'm going to try and see if we can get some more details on that. Maybe get some folks from Sweden to come on and talk about how that's playing out over there. But that will definitely timing. That'll be a lot if that indeed plays out. I'm sure there'll be a lot more information over the next 24 hours or so. Almost done. Anybody else? Anything else before we wrap up? Any last comment? Folks wanted to make sure they got in.
I just tweeted you a picture, so I don't know if it's him or not. They said this is an undoctored photo, so he can't really tell from this picture. So
I was gonna say, the practicism of racism, it plays out like nowhere like it plays out here. You could be in Sweden and in an all-white country, they practice it. I mean, if white people went to work here, they'll see some work. I didn't even hear about Sweden, no uprising of white people. I mean, white people had an uprising here, and everybody around the world would hear about that. Going around about 2 months, Yeah, so no one taught out like these people, man.
Right on. Yeah, one thing I guess I will get in before we wrap things up. Again, we'll be back tomorrow with the book study session, Gary Rivlin, Katrina After the Flood, and then Saturday, compensatory call-in, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Dr. Frances Cress-Welsing, she should be here this coming Sunday. It will be good to get her update on what's been taking place. She'll be here Sunday, I guess, evening, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Dr. Welsing will be with us this Sunday. It would be good to hear from her again. I guess the last comment I wanted to make sure I got in, just on the TV thing and why I don't, I just wrote a review for Viola Davis, How to Get Away with Murder, and we have definitely talked about a good number of TV programs and movies down through the years. But just again, to quote Dr. Welsing, reading is more important than watching television. With, I guess, how would I present it? The movie that just came out about Whitey Bulger, Black Mass, I think that's what it's called. I haven't seen it, but just came out. I think it's pretty popular. A lot of folks were talking about it. One of our listeners asked if it would be constructive to go view the film to study for racism. I'll say again, if you're just looking for the racism, you can watch anything. You don't need to make any special effort to study racism picking a particular movie. You can grab anything that racism is going to be there. I would especially not encourage going to the movies to study racism, because it just becomes an excuse to continue doing the thing that is familiar that we need to stop doing. The best course of action, in my view, would be to not spend money on racist entertainment, to not go to the movies, to even get rid of cable. Pam has talked about that before. Really making some changes in terms of how we spend our coins in an economic system dominated not by capitalism, but by white supremacy. That would be best. Even if I was taking the position, well, okay, I can watch Black Mass to learn about racism, because that comes up in the film, right? It's set in Boston, so it's got some incidents of racism. Even within that, I didn't even, look super hard. This film is based on a book that is written by one of our previous guests, Dick Lair. He's a white man. He's a professor in communications up in Boston. And he wrote the book. I think it's by the same title, Black Mass. He co-authored the book about Whitey Bulger. Racism, white supremacy is all over the book. Like, the whole context of the book, according to what they wrote, is around busing, so-called what they call segregation in Boston, and white people being like publicly, virulently opposed to little nigger children going to school with their white kids. They have tons of documented. This was huge. Ted Landsmark, I used the photo in an article I had published earlier this year, where he gets speared with the American flag. That's in Boston in the 1970s. This is the context of Whitey Bulger's criminal activity. So this is a big part of the book Dick Lair wrote that this film is based on. I don't think that they're going to have as much information and detail in this film as what really happened and what you would get if you read the book. And that's what I've seen consistently, where white people, they minimize the same tactics that you hear on the program. They minimize, they dilute, they obfuscate. So even if you're taking it as I'm gonna go and I'm gonna study this for the racism, white supremacy, even that is not going to be accurate. You would do much better going and doing some serious study and research, and that's what we need. Serious study and thinking. And in my opinion, it's much better to exercise your mind and strengthen your thinking and your use of logic when you're reading, not sitting in front of a movie screen or watching television, in my opinion. Even with the movie, even if I was to take that seriously, which I don't, but even if I was to take it seriously, that, okay, we're going to the movies and this is serious study. We're going to, see Straight Outta Compton or Black Mass or whatever the whatever the new flick is, Precious, whatever. It's dark in the movie theater. It's going to be challenging to take notes. I guess you could pull out your cell phone and, work away on your thumbs during the course of the program, but of the course of the movie. But that's I'm incredulous. I'll leave it at that. You would do much better reading, do some serious research. I think that is how we will strengthen and improve our communications and our thinking, our ability to use logic to solve this problem. The television stuff, I think, just a lot more of that is just an excuse for entertainment. And you're missing a lot of details. More than anything, you're missing a lot of detail. Right on. So we'll be here tomorrow with the book study group. Session number 4, Gary Rivlin, Katrina, After the Flood. Looking forward to commentary from everyone. If you have confusion, problems, you have a question, suggestion, feel free to drop a line. untiljustice@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @UntilJustice. Listener supported, counter racist radio. Invest if you think the program is constructive. Racism-notes.blogspot.com. Listener supported, counter racist radio. PayPal button is in the top right corner. If you're not into PayPal, drop me an email and we will get you a physical mailing address. Thanks to all the folks who have invested. Super appreciate the support. Allowed us to stay on the air, closing in on 7 years. I hope it has helped folks get a better understanding of what racism, white supremacy is, how it works, what it means to be white. We will be back in about 24 hours. Stay codified. Buckle up if you're going to get in the vehicle. do everything we can to minimize contact with enforcement officers. Definitely, it would be best to remain sober under the system of white supremacy. We don't need unnecessary problems. Definitely don't need to be in the presence of white people who are intoxicated, under the influence. Horrible decision. Even be mindful about the non-white people if you're going to be around them, if they are under the influence. Just a lot of times we don't make the best decisions under those circumstances. Certainly not under the influence if you're going to drive, even if you're going to be a passenger or pedestrian. Race soldiers constantly look to make problems for black people. Let's do everything we can to minimize that. That said, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice as soon as possible. Context of White Supremacy signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.